Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff. Eric, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm good, buddy. Good to be here. Glad to be back home. Had a fantastic week. And Mrs. B and I and Nikki jumped in the truck and drove to Minneapolis to visit my brother and sister. And my brother's going through some stuff right now. Thought he was out of it, but he's back in it. So just kind of there to give him some moral support. And Lori's Uncle Al, turned 80 years old last weekend. So we went to surprise him and show up at his birthday party, which was really cool. He's still such a fun guy. I took Rick Steiner hunting with Al and his brother Gary, who's since passed, up in Craig, Colorado. And Al loved hanging out with Rick Steiner. He laughed the whole trip. But we did that, and then just went out to some apple orchards. You know, apple orchards are a big deal in Minnesota. A lot of great apple orchards up there. And in the fall, when they harvest the apples, there's all these like apple festivals at these various different apple orchards. So we went out in the country and did some of that Sunday afternoon. Found a couple great restaurants along the way on the way back. Then went down to La Crosse and visited our friends Bob and Tammy Niederkorn in Holman, Wisconsin. They have the Heritage Meat Market down there that they started themselves, and they are just kicking ass. They're doing such a great job. Visited them, then we drove, and the fall colors are amazing. Man, I wish everybody would get a chance to see the fall colors in certain areas of the country like we did. Drove down along the Mississippi River down to Decorah, Iowa, went to an art gallery there. A friend of ours has got some art that's being displayed there. So we went down to visit that and support them and then drove home. It's been quite the trip. Had an absolute blast, though. Had some great food along the way. I found a great restaurant in Bismarck, North Dakota. I'm starting to get good at this stuff. Great restaurant. Anyway, enough of that. My vacation.
How long of a drive is that?
It's about 14 hours to Minneapolis, but we slow roll it. We like to explore stuff. So if we see a little town along the way, we'll stop in and check it out. So it's about a 14-hour drive, then another 3 hours down to La Crosse. So it wasn't that far of a drive.
That's pretty fun to, I've always appreciated that you and the wife, man, y'all are road trippers. I mean, you've done so many of those big trips, even from Wyoming to Florida. I mean, that's a haul right there, is it not?
Yeah, I don't know that, well, we'll do it again, but that's not for fun. That one's work, but these are just, 14-hour road trip for me is like, it's relaxation. Half the time we're in the cell zone, can't get phone calls, can't sit and look at your phone and check messages and all that. So it's really relaxing.
Well, I'm glad you had a relaxing trip because today I'm going to bust your balls like I do every week at 83weeks.com. If you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Go hit the subscribe button, turn on the notifications bell. You don't want to miss the next time we're live, and Eric is live all the time. We've even got a little membership over there. So there's exclusive videos for members only. Eric's been absolutely wearing it out, and we've gotten a lot of great feedback. I've seen a tremendous amount of feedback about us talking about the cruiserweights last week. Eric, what was the feedback you saw about that episode?
All good, all positive, and a lot of it. And that was, I have to say, Conrad, this happens. Fortunately, it happens a lot with us, but that was one of the shows that as soon as we were done, I just knew that was for me. I had so much fun doing that show and going through it with you that I kind of felt like it had to be one of the better shows we've done. It was such a fun show.
Check it out if you haven't already. 83weeks.com. It's about creating the cruiserweight division. Lots of rumor and innuendo that we clear up along the way. And we really sort of highlight what a force Rey Mysterio was. Eric, I know as companion pieces for that episode, you did your top 5 cruiserweight matches, your top 5 cruiserweights in WCW. All of those videos are available now at 83weeks.com. Today, our topic is going to be something totally different. And for much later, we're talking about Dixie Carter. And Dixie Carter is somebody that I feel like, history has maybe not been the kindest to. And I want to celebrate some of her contributions to professional wrestling. But more importantly, I want to understand more about the dynamic that existed between your relationship with Dixie Carter, because there's lots of false narratives out there about your time in TNA, I think. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, like I was running the company and making decisions and hiring and firing people and all that. Yeah.
Well, let's start at the beginning. When did you first hear about Dixie Carter? How was she on your radar? Were you keeping up with what was going on in TNA, or were you completely unplugged from TNA until Hulkster gives you a call, or how does that all come together?
Yeah, I was completely unplugged. Not because I wasn't interested in wrestling or had a bad taste in my mouth about anybody or anything. It wasn't that. It was just I was pretty busy. Jason Hervey and I we're killing it in Hollywood and producing a lot of shows, and I was just fairly busy. And I was living in LA, 3 or 4 days of the week, and then I'd fly home for the weekend, the long weekend, or Lori would fly out to LA. I kept an apartment down on 3rd Street in Santa Monica, really nice, block off the beach and all that. So it was a nice place. It was still, 2-bedroom apartment, but it was nice. So I just didn't have time, and I wasn't interested at the time. I had so much other stuff going on, and I knew of TNA. I don't think I'd ever watched an episode before I got a call to come and meet Dixie. I certainly watched an episode or two before I took the meeting, but yeah, it was totally off my radar, man.
June of '02 is when TNA is first created, right up the road from me in Huntsville, Alabama. And the following month is when you make your debut for Vince McMahon in the WWE. So it was almost a hell has frozen over type moment in professional wrestling. But there was certainly speculation at the time that perhaps Vince McMahon reached out to you in an effort to prevent you from going to TNA. Have you heard that before? The timing does have some people a little curious.
Oh gosh, it's amazing how creative people could be in the imaginations that, you come across in the world of social media. Like if those people could apply that same kind of imagination and creativity to something productive, like, I don't know, writing a book or a movie or a song or something, the world would be a better place. But no, that's the first I've heard of that. And I think it's pretty laughable.
So let's talk about, when you first are aware of TNA, like, do you remember getting a call from Jeff or Jerry or anybody in those early formative days of TNA? Was anybody ever kicking the tires just to take your temperature?
Yeah, early on, I think when in the very beginning, before TNA initially had even launched, and it was Jeff Jarrett and Jerry Jarrett that were behind it all. I did get a call from both of them. They were both on the same call, and I remember it specifically because I was driving between Phoenix and Las Vegas. I was headed up to Vegas for a meeting, and we were living in Phoenix at the time. So I remember exactly the phone call because I was concerned about losing cell service along the way. So I had to pull over and sit on the side of the road for 20 minutes or a half hour during the call.
And you just weren't interested?
What was the call like? Brief explanation of what they were doing back then. Again, this is, a minute ago. So some of these details may be sketchy, and I apologize to Jeff if I'm getting any of this wrong. It's not my intention. But I think I know they explained the idea of doing, I think it was weekly pay-per-views. And or pay-per-views without television.
That's right.
That was the idea. And that was a brick wall for me. I just couldn't wrap my head around that idea. So I politely, I appreciated the phone call, and it was one call. They basically explained to me what they were doing and wanted to know if I may be interested. And it was a very courteous, amicable call. And I thanked them, let them know that I was pretty busy with the things I was doing, and I just wouldn't be able to dedicate any time to it. In truth, I just didn't see the model. I couldn't wrap my head around that revenue model of pay-per-view only, even if it's, $9.99. And then, later on we found out that Jay Hassman, who I had worked with, he was the guy responsible for the Cat's Ass logo. So I found out that, Jay was involved, and I further distanced myself from the opportunity. And again, not because it wasn't a good opportunity, but because I was just focused on other things.
I don't know how to ask this, so I'm just going to ask as best I can. When Bruce Pritchard left WWE and then had a cup of coffee with TNA, he felt like after the TNA experience, wrestling was in his rearview mirror. Wrestling had decided it didn't want Bruce Pritchard, and he had decided he didn't want it back. And it was a similar story to Tony Schiavone. He felt like, maybe he hoped one day he'd be able to go to work for WWE once WCW closed the doors. It never happened. And he had spent just a boatload of time in the industry. And I don't know. I think it's probably fair to say both of those guys got a little bitter towards wrestling. Now we know they're back knee deep. It's their lifelong passion, and they're loving it and having more success than they've ever had in their entire career. But was that a process you went through too, Eric, where after WCW went down, you were like, I just don't have the passion. It's not there anymore. I don't want to compete with Vince. I don't want to go be a part of a startup. I don't mind taking a paycheck to go work for Vince a little bit here and there because it's easy and I can do it. But that fire in the belly for professional wrestling, it's just burnout. Did that happen to you at any point?
Sure. Of course. At varying, to varying degrees over a long period of time, it's, that feeling has come up a couple times. That wasn't the issue when I got the phone call from Jerry and Jeff. It really was. I'm just so focused on what I'm doing. We're kicking ass. I didn't want the distraction. One of the problems that I have, Conrad, in my life, and it's not uncommon, especially with entrepreneurs, is focus. And it's a real legitimate challenge for me because it's so easy for me to get excited about things, projects, ideas, opportunities, and I end up taking on more than I should, even if it's not taking a lot of my time in terms of me physically having to be somewhere. If it's occupying time inside of my head, I have to pay attention. I have to pay attention to that. I have to be careful not to overextend myself. So for me, it wasn't so much bitter or bad taste in my mouth or none of that. It was just, okay, I've done that. I've done the wrestling thing, kind of been to the mountaintop, achieved quite a bit. Wish things would have turned out different, but all in all, I was pretty happy with where I was at, what I accomplished, and was ready to move on. But there was no bitterness or anger or resentment, nothing like that. But throughout, over the last, however long it's been, 20 years, I don't know, I lost track of time. There are certain points in time, including right now, by the way, as we speak, where a wrestling project pops up. And even though my initial reaction is, no, thanks, my head's over here, it's not over there. Certain things pop up that I just can't resist. And I try to fight that a little bit. I try to fight it a lot, but if an opportunity is so interesting, I'll end up taking it. But they're few and far between, mostly because, again, I'm having a hard time saying this, mostly because I'm functioning on about 2.5 hours sleep, but also because I don't want to come off arrogant or cocky or full of myself. I'm well aware of what I accomplished and what I didn't accomplish. People remind me every day on social media, so it's hard to forget. But wrestling to me has to be a really unique challenge. If I'm going to get back into wrestling, there has to be a really compelling idea or reason for me to get excited about it. Again, because I've been to the mountaintop. I did what I did in WCW. My time in WWE, I'm never going to beat that in terms of being an on-camera performer. when all I had to do was show up on Monday morning and learn my lines and rehearse my character and go out there and just have a freaking blast. That's all I did for however many years I was there, 3 or 4, whatever it was. I'm not going to beat that. So if I know I'm not going to reach a higher level with an endeavor, then it's really hard for me to get excited about it. Unless, like I said, it's something really interested. So I've gone through what Bruce and I'm sure Jeff has gone through, and we all go through it, and we find those opportunities. We get excited again. And like Tony and Jeff, they're experiencing, Jeff in particular. I mean, he's living a dream, man. He's out there in his mid-50s. He looks like $1 million. He's out there working with, kids that are 25, 30 years old, and he's out working them all day long, and he's having fun doing it. Man, that's how you retire. I'm not a big fan of retirement, but if you're going to wind down your career, you do it like Jeff or you do it like Tony Schiavone. I'm so happy for both of those guys because they found that thing about wrestling that could get them excited.
Well, here's something we can all get excited about. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as just 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get in on the action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and even Texas. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. I'm a big believer in this. My cousins, Derek and Clint, are all about some Prize Picks. And how about a little pro tip here? Be on the lookout for the Anthony Edwards free square for the Timberwolves Lakers opening night game on October 22nd. Anthony Edwards just needs to score 1 point for that square to win. How about that? And if you sign up today, you'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. And they've even got weekly promotions like Taco Tuesday, where each Tuesday Prize Picks will discount certain player projections by up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineup. And here's how it works. You're just going to pick a couple of players and you're going to pick a couple of stat lines. Like Justin Jefferson, will he get more than 83.5 receiving yards? And Patrick Mahomes, will he get less than 267.5 passing yards? It's that simple. I can't tell you how much fun I've had with this. It is a whole new way to play the game, and I have had so much fun. It makes the games more fun. It makes it more interesting, and I have fallen in love with Prize Picks, and I think you will too. All you do, again, is take a look at the players and the different stat types, and you pick more than or less than. It's that simple. Download the app today. Use our code 83weeks and you'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Doesn't even have to win. I want to repeat that. Download the app today and use the code 83weeks to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. So listen, I appreciate your candor about your interest and appetite in pro wrestling. We do know you wind up going back to work for Vince, we said, in July of 2002. You're going to hang around there, and then I think you'll wind up in like 2007. You'll have some sporadic appearances here and there. But there's a couple of years where you're just seemingly solely focusing on your non-wrestling ventures, if you will. During that 2007 to 2009 timeframe, or at any point prior to that, had you checked out TNA programming at all? Like, did you know... Obviously, Jeff Jarrett's involved, but were you seeing the way the program looked on television? Were you hearing anything from people in the business? What was your perception of TNA at that point?
Yeah, I dropped in to see what it was all about. I'd run into somebody and they'd ask me about, TNA or if I'd seen it or whatever. So, I checked it out a few times and, it was... it's a studio wrestling show. No matter, it's in a soundstage, and that vibe just isn't one that can get me excited about the product, regardless of who's in a ring or how great the action or even the stories are. When you're in that small studio environment, it's just really hard to get my attention. Put it that way. So I had dropped in on it, saw what it was, and that was about it. I probably spent a total of 10 minutes, watching TNA before I ended up having my first meeting with Dixie Carter. I watched a little bit more prior to that meeting, but in terms of my general viewing, I maybe dropped in once or twice for a couple minutes and checked it out, see what it was all about.
Let's talk a little bit about the way this opportunity first comes to be. I mean, we had heard about Hulk Hogan and TNA for years. I mean, they had teased the whole thing with Jeff Jarrett in Japan, and here comes the guitar shot, and up comes Hulkster Bloody. The Hulkster was just maybe creating a little leverage for Vince. He went and got some more paydays, roll tide. But now there's going to be another bite at the apple. Does Hulk reach out to you and say, hey, brother, they're calling me about TNA. I want you to take a look? Or walk us through how that whole conversation happens between you and Mr. Balea.
Yeah, that's where it got interesting. Now, there was a lot going on at that time, not just with me and my business and Jason's, but with Hulk. We all know his backstory during this period of time. There was, his son's accident. There was a divorce. There was a lot of drama going on. Oh yeah. And that's when a lot of the surgery started happening. Back surgery, neck surgery, knee surgery, hip surgery. It was all, his back was really, really bothering him at that point. Really bothering him. It was to the point where he couldn't get in and out of a car. I felt horrible for him. We'd go somewhere, we'd go out to dinner or something, and just watching him trying to get out of a vehicle was painful to watch, more or less, what he was going through. And we had gotten very close during that period of time, and I had tried to help Hulk with things outside of wrestling, just managing his personal business. And it got to the point where he was in such tough shape, and with all of the drama going on with regard to the divorce, I was not taking over, but I was essentially managing his business issues for him or with him. Hulk told me, look, you speak for me. If you want to agree to a deal on my behalf, you don't even have to ask. Keep me in a loop, but you speak for me, were his exact words. So that was with regard to his trademarks and all of that. So at some point, I guess it was Jeff, probably Jeff, I don't know that for certain. I'm assuming it was Jeff, reached out to Hulk and said that, he and Dixie would love to have a meeting with him. And again, I don't know what Hulk said on that call. I wasn't on it, but basically, let them know that I was handling his business and I was working with an attorney. It's not like I was writing contracts. I was working with two different attorneys and one of his accountants, but, let them know that if Hulk was going to come on board, that in all likelihood I'd be coming with him. And I think the first meeting was on a jet. I think they flew down to Florida, or perhaps they were already in Florida and were heading back to Nashville. Jumped on a jet, flew to Nashville, and went to Dixie's home and had our first meeting.
Talk me through your expectations going into that meeting. Did you think, hey, we're going to go kick the tires? I don't know that there's really anything here, but it means a lot to Hulk and he means a lot to me. So I'm going to be there to support my friend, but realistically, I don't know about this. That's the vibe I think you would approach it with. I'm not saying that you're inherently negative. I know you're a positive guy. I know that that's the way your brain works. You're the damn the torpedoes dude. But at this point, seeing that, hey man, my man's struggling to get out of a car. Why are we having a wrestling conversation? I could see you saying to yourself, I'm going to do this, but it feels like a waste of time.
No, that would be a fair assumption for people that know me, and I'm struggling again because I got to be careful what I say here. Some of this is just not my business to share, but because of the divorce.
Oh, I got you.
Because of this giant unknown in terms of how that was going to turn out, cash flow was kind of important to Hulk.
Got it. I understand.
And I don't think Hulk's a complicated dude sometimes. He loves, his identity in many respects, up until probably the last couple of years, it was kind of like Ric Flair. You know, they just can't separate the character from the person.
Mm-hmm.
And they miss that person. They miss that character. They miss going out and performing in front of a live crowd. They miss the crowd support. It's been their lives. It's their identity. So Hulk was struggling with that, but his physical condition wasn't going to allow him to get too involved. I'm not going to say he needed the money. He didn't need it, but it was a strategic advantage at that time.
Yes.
So I knew he would likely do something if the money was right. And I wanted to at least be there to help him navigate that. Again, I was working with his attorney. I wasn't out there freelancing and trying to write contracts or approve contracts. But in terms of managing it, I went into it with, okay, if he wants to do this, I want to do whatever I can do to make sure it's the best deal for him. And that he doesn't commit to things, because that's another thing about Hulk is he'll get excited and have all the most honest, greatest intentions in the world, but he'll commit to things that physically at that time, he just really wasn't capable of doing. It's like he didn't want to admit that he couldn't do certain things physically, just refused to admit it. So he'd agree to do things, and then it ends up being an issue down the road. So I was there basically just to help him score the deal. If he wanted it, I was there to help him get the deal he needed or wanted. And that was about it. I had no intentions, zero intentions or interest. And again, it's not because I had a bad impression or perception. It wasn't that. It's just I didn't want to disrupt the life I had with the wrestling project that I knew was going to eat up a lot of space inside my head. Regardless of whether or not I had to be there physically, I knew it was going to eat up a lot of space in my head, and I just was trying to prevent that.
So let's talk about, this experience. We've all heard the famous stories from the 80s about how Vince got pretty much everybody that he wanted from the territory system to commit. He'd fly them first class to New York City, and then a limousine would pick them up and take them into the office. And they have a personal meeting with Vince, and after he promises them the moon and you're going to make more money than ever and you're going to be a huge star, we've got you reservations at this 5-star restaurant, and we've got you these great seats for a Broadway show, and enjoy your trip to New York. And boy, we're going to make a lot of money. And he did this certainly for the husbands he was trying to recruit, but he really did it for the wives. He's trying to make sure that, hey, that we've got a full commitment back home because this traveling schedule is going to be brutal. We need mama bought in. I get it. We haven't heard a lot about the Dixie Carter way of recruiting because, well, by and large, a lot of folks who wound up in TNA had gone through the WWE system and were now looking for a second act, or they were hoping that this could possibly get them to the WWE, this TNA opportunity. But this is different. This is the biggest star wrestling ever knew. And now Dixie Carter is trying to land the big fish. And as much as Hulk may have not needed the money, but sure would like to have it, boy, they needed Hulk Hogan. They probably felt like this is what is going to get us over the hump. And they felt that way because it was Hulk that got Vince over the hump. It was Hulk that got WCW over the hump. It makes sense that maybe he'll do it for us too. Talk to us a little bit about that recruiting process and that experience. You said, the jet's going to come get us. Now we're going to Dixie's house. Pick up the story from there.
It was very casual. And I want to make this really clear, because as we go on throughout this episode, however long it's going to take, I'm sure I'm going to say things that some may interpret as me not appreciating Dixie or having affection for her. I do have affection for Dixie. I like Dixie. She's a good human being. She really, really honestly is. She's almost too good of a person to be in a wrestling business. And you know what I mean by that. That being said, and this will support it, Dixie's real. She's not a phony person. She's a very genuine, warm, and pretty open. She's not a game player in that respect. She was open. She was direct, in terms of describing what she had hoped to achieve with Hulk. She was so unpretentious. Now I don't know where she lives now, but she had like a really, really beautiful home. And her husband was there, Serge, and he's cool as shit. I miss him. He was fun to be around. But aside from the obvious, money that was in the family, in the way and where Dixie lived, she was so unpretentious and down to earth. And I think that's what made it easy for me, because I enjoyed working with her and talking to her, because like I said, she wasn't playing any games. We literally got to her house. We sat down in, I don't know what kind of room it was, I guess a sitting area. Very nice, very beautiful home. And Jeff was there. Jeff was driving a lot of the conversations in the very beginning. I think Dixie relied on Jeff because of Jeff's previous relationship with Hulk. Jeff was there, Dixie was there. It was just us, 4 of us, and kind of talked through the vision that Dixie had and what she hoped to achieve with Hulk. And, she wanted to achieve some of the same things that I did in WCW. She wanted more sponsors. She wanted to be able to increase her licensing portfolio, which was pretty much non-existent at the time in any meaningful way. She wanted to shore up her relationship with the network. There were a lot of things outside of what Hulk could do in the ring, that she wanted Hulk to be kind of the face of the company with regard to, again, potential sponsorship meetings or meetings with the network or any of the big trade and industry events. She wanted that Hulk Hogan brand associated with the TNA brand.
So when you're in the room, you said that, Dixie's there, Jeff's there, obviously you and Hulk are there. Is there anybody else there, do you think?
No.
And are you guys, do you think it's just Jeff and Dixie sort of painting a picture of what it might look like and what it might feel like? Or are you getting down to the nitty gritty particulars about cash and creative?
No, the first meeting was more, I always refer to them as temperature checks or chemistry checks. It's just, you don't know for sure how you're going to feel. I don't. I'll be specific. I don't know how I'm going to feel about somebody until I've got a couple hours with them in a room away from a work environment. And that's, again, it's my process. I'm pretty good at reading people. I generally am. I've been wrong, but generally I'm pretty good. And it's easier for me to read someone outside of their environment than it is in their environment. And we were in Dixie's house. That's her environment. She was in control. We came to them. Okay, so there's that. And I was well aware of that. But again, she was so, I don't want to say charming, because I don't want it to sound like it was fake. It was real, but she's just such a naturally charming person. My defense mechanism went down right away. So I'll usually walk into meetings like that mentally prepared to think through a lot of the things that I'm hearing, right? She disarmed me immediately, and it was just a very casual meeting, but it was kind of like high altitude. Yeah, but maybe we could do this, or what about this idea? Or Hulk, would you feel comfortable in this environment? Again, talking about sponsors and networks and things. And then we left. And that's when the deal process started. We didn't talk money. We didn't talk dates. Nothing specific. It was all very general, kind of a macro view of what it could possibly look like, that being Hulk Hogan and TNA together.
You're a good judge of character, and you can get a read on people. And you sort of alluded to it there, that sometimes your defense mechanism goes up and it's a feeling out process for you. But right away, you didn't get any concern from Dixie. Like, you didn't think this deal's going to stink, right?
No. On the contrary, I felt really good. My read on Dixie was almost immediately a positive one. Like I said, I dropped my defense mechanism. I wasn't analyzing. I was just listening and reacting as opposed to analyzing what I was hearing. It was just a really good meeting. I immediately liked Dixie. Jeff I had known, so there was no unknowns with Jeff. I had a pretty good idea what Jeff was all about, and I liked Jeff, understood him. But Dixie was the unknown, but that didn't last long. I felt pretty good about it right away.
Before you go into a meeting like that, I know that for some people listening to this, they're going to say this sounds silly, but a lot of salespeople have to get in the right headspace before they're making a presentation, because you have to be in that right frame of mind. And if you are, it makes all the difference in the world. Did you have sort of a pre-game ritual for meetings like this where you have to have an inner self-talk, or do you have certain things you know you're going to do on game day, so to speak, like this to get ready for a meeting?
Yeah, I still do. In fact, I've really spent more time mentally preparing myself for meetings or important conversations that are relative to business. And especially because I've got so many things going on inside of my head, even if they're just like little pet projects around the house or something, it's like this movie's constantly running 24 hours a day inside of my head. So sometimes I'll jump from one kind of area. Jason and I might have been working on a documentary, for example, or an idea for a documentary. And I'm negotiating this wrestling deal over here. And sometimes in my head, I just bounce back and forth, and I don't do a very good job on either one of those tasks when I'm bouncing back and forth between them. And there may be 3 or 4 things going on sometimes in my head. But when it's important, when I know I need to focus, I give myself a half hour. The first 10 minutes, 5, 10, 8 minutes, I pray, just to be honest, be transparent about it. I talk to God, and that's part of my process of getting my head right, because a lot of what I've learned over the years is that I need to focus on my intentions. Why am I even on this call? How do I want this call to end, or to this meeting? What is it I want to walk away from this meeting knowing, having, or feeling? And I check myself. Am I doing this for the right reasons? Am I taking this meeting I check my own intentions, not just the intentions of the people that I may be doing business with. I spend more time thinking about my own. Am I doing this just for the money? Because if I am, I'm out. I'm not doing anything ever again just for the money. I did that with WWE in 2019. I'm never going to do it again. So I do an inventory. And once I get through that process, then I just clear my mind. I guess it's called meditating. I don't think of it that way, but I focus on my breathing. I focus on my posture. I focus on clearing my head and doing my best not to have a conscious thought. I can't affect my subconscious yet. I'm working on it. But in terms of my conscious thought, the stuff that's going on up here in the frontal lobe, that I try to clear, so that when I go into the meeting, I'm hearing things accurately. I'm reading the room properly. I'm not going in with, prejudging a situation or a person or an opportunity, literally going in with kind of a blank slate, so to speak. But it takes me about a half hour to get through that process. Now, my process back then was similar, but probably not as disciplined or focused as it is now. I've just gotten better at it, and probably more than anything, understand how important it is for me, just because of the way my fucked up mind works. So yeah, I spent a lot of time doing that. Even in WWE, I don't know nobody ever asked me about it, but before I'd go out in a segment, I would go up to Gorilla. I would stand in a corner facing the wall, out of the way, and I'd go through this or a similar process for 15 or 20 minutes before I would go out and do whatever I was doing on camera. Same thing in TNA. So yeah, I definitely have a process, and it's fun for me because I learn more about myself in the process of getting ready to do something.
Now, I know what you do now, but back then, how did you deodorize your balls before a big meeting like this?
I aired them bad boys out every opportunity I could.
Well, listen, I know some people just, rub their sack around some soap, and then some other people may spritz some cologne down there. Let me introduce you to Mando spray deodorant. It won't irritate your bits. The first ingredient is water, not alcohol. And it's also proven to control odor for 72 hours We're talking about 3 days. So technically, I guess, some of these WWE superstars, they could go work a pay-per-view on Saturday and take a shower before Saturday and then go do a live event on Sunday and then show up and do Monday Night Raw and not have to worry about smelling bad until Tuesday. That's some serious stuff. That's Mando. It's also got a 360 degree spray. You never had that before, but it's ideal for your scrotum. You can really get up in there and you don't have to rub it in. It sprays on clear and it dries quickly. And it even works upside down. And I know this is Dave Silva's fault or favorite part rather. He can get way down there like he's hiking a football, like he's a center for the Auburn Tigers wearing the number 61. And he can get one spray, one spritz, and his balls are covered. His taint is covered. His grundle is handled with ease. And new customers right now can get $5 off the starter pack with our exclusive code and link. Just use the code 83weeks at shopmando.com. That's shopmando.com. If you're not in the loop on Mando, what have you been waiting for? This was created by a doctor who saw firsthand how normal BO is just being misdiagnosed and mistreated. And now Mando's whole body deodorant is powerful enough for the toughest odor, but gentle enough to use anywhere. It's aluminum free, it's baking soda free, it's cruelty free, it's dye free, and they're going to get you stink free. It's good for your pits, your packages, your belly buttons, your butt cracks, your stinky crevices, your stomach folds, your nasty ass feet. Mando ain't scared of shit, and it's going to make you smell great and not like shit. Mando starter pack, perfect for new customers. It comes with the solid stick deodorant, the cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. And right now we've got a special discount code. Get you hooked up on our favorite smelling whole body deodorant on the market. How about $5 off a starter pack with that code? That's like 40% off your starter pack. Right now, use the code 83weeks at shopmando.com. That's shopmando.com. It's time to smell better naked. Your partner will thank you.
I love this product so much. I just got the spray deodorant the other day. They shipped it to me. Absolutely fantastic product. I'm going to try to interview the doctor. She's a woman who created this line of products because she's done an amazing job. I love her approach to it. Love the way she's marketed it. All that is cool as hell. And I'm very fascinated with what she's accomplished. But the product itself is off the charts. The soap, like a bar soap, is amazing. I travel with it. I had to go out and buy a little soap container, put in my bag. I will not travel without my Mando soap. Will not do it.
You got to try it if you haven't already. It's shopmando.com. Use our code 83weeks. You're going to get $5 off your starter pack and your nuts will smell as good as Dave Silva's. Guaranteed.
Not while I'm drinking coffee, please.
Sorry. I can't help myself. Well, I mean, when we get sponsors like that, I think you're supposed to have fun with that,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hey, so you're in this meeting with Dixie Carter. She's laying out the vision. You got Jeff Jarrett there. We haven't spoken about this. Jeff is a friend of ours, but I just want to address the elephant in the room. The last time Jeff Jarrett and Hulk Hogan were together in WCW, it didn't end well. The result was Hulk Hogan filed a lawsuit. Not because Jeff did anything wrong, but he was there, and he was Vince Russo's chosen one, for lack of a better word. And Hulk had played hard to get with Jeff before. So there have to be some underlying feelings on both sides where Hulk is like, I'm not sure if I can trust this guy. I remember what happened in WCW. And I'm sure Jeff conversely felt like, I'm not sure if I can trust this guy. We built this whole angle up and then he went back to work for Vince McMahon. There is some uneasiness there. And the calming voice in the room, as crazy as it sounds, Dixie Carter there had to disarm everybody a little bit and just cut through some of that weirdness and dynamic. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, but I didn't sense any of that. No, I can't speak for Jeff or get a read on what Jeff was feeling at the time because I wasn't around him except for in that meeting. And he certainly didn't show any concern about whether or not he could trust Hulk in that meeting. But I can tell you from Hulk's side of the thing, because we talked a lot at that time. I mean, Hulk was well aware of the Russo-Jarrett connection in WCW, but I think, when you've been around the business as long as Hulk has, when you've seen as many things as you've seen business-wise in the wrestling industry as Hulk has seen and been through, you're not surprised by much. And I think Hulk just looked at the Russo-Jarrett thing in WCW as, yeah, that was then, this is now, let's move forward. He didn't hold a grudge. That's what I'm saying. Not even a grudge. He respected Jeff because Jeff had been in the business as long as he had. Jerry Jarrett, played a small role, but a role in Hulk's career. And with Hulk, those things matter more in some respects than business issues that evolve down the road. Hulk could really look, the whole WCW Vince Russo mess, the lawsuit that followed it, all that. I just don't even think it was a thought. It wasn't a factor. It never came up in our conversations. Hulk never suggested to me, okay, we got to watch out for this Jarrett cat because remember him and Russo. Now, keep in mind, Russo was there in TNA. That was a bigger issue, and we'll get to that, I'm sure. But not with Jeff. Hulk didn't express any reservations about Jeff whatsoever with regard to Russo.
Let's put a button on the meeting. When you guys start winding down the meeting and they're sort of laying out the vision, I mean, is there a handshake understanding that we're going to do business together, or is it more, hey, we're going to wait and see what the offers look like and see if we can put together a deal? How do we adjourn the meeting?
On a very positive note, we left there knowing that there was probably going to be an offer that Hulk would feel comfortable accepting. It was almost like a foregone conclusion. No, we weren't ready to sign on the dotted line until we worked out. There was a lot of details to work out in terms of availability, his schedule, what he couldn't do in the ring and all that kind of stuff. There were a lot of terms that had to be dealt with, but we felt confident just based on the vibe and the energy in the room that it was unlikely that we weren't going to get an offer that we would probably be interested in. It was very positive. And that sounds clinical the way I just described it. We weren't high-fiving
right
in the car on the way home, but kind of, sort of, in a way.
You had optimism. You were hopeful.
Yeah.
Do you recall, was there a key word or phrase that Dixie was trying to hammer home about her vision that really turned Hulk's head? Like, oh, that's exciting. Maybe it happened, maybe it didn't happen. But did she lay out what her goal for TNA was? Was there something that you remember that really stands out? Like, I remember this was important to Dixie, and boy, she really hammered Hulk with this.
No, there really wasn't. And I think, looking back, that's probably one of the reasons why TNA ended up where TNA ended up, is because there wasn't a clear vision. I don't know if anybody ever had what I would consider a vision for the company. There was a lot of desire to be in the wrestling business. There was a desire to make an income from the wrestling business. I don't want to speak for Dixie, but I got the impression it was more about accomplishing something than it was financial. I don't think there was I want to build $100 million a year company, or I want to build a company that has not only weekly television, but I want to be doing at least 120 dates a year on tour. I want to create a licensing and merchandising mega machine. There was nothing other than, we're excited about being in the wrestling business and making you a part of it, Hulk. No, to answer your question, there was never a specific goal or vision or target even, other than general. We want to increase our sponsorships. We want to increase our licensing and merchandising, all that kind of stuff. But those things are obvious. But there was nobody ever said, here's the vision for TNA. We think we can do this within 5 years or 3 years. Here are our next steps, and we'd like to have you on board to do it. I I don't think it existed internally or certainly in the conversation that we had.
I know I'm going to get in the weeds with this question, but from a sales perspective, because that's what this is, it's a sales meeting. They're trying to sell you on coming to work for Dixie Carter and TNA. They're trying to sell Dixie or trying to sell Eric and Hogan on coming and joining the team. So I can't help but ask sales related questions. You know, when you go back and you think about that meeting, I'm trying to figure out what the objections might be. And just to explain what I mean, because I realize not everybody listening to this is familiar with that term. If you're making a presentation and someone says, yeah, but what about this? I would consider that an objection. Like, I hear what you're saying, but whatever comes after the comma is usually the objection. And I think in a sales process back and forth, the best time to come to address an objection isn't once it comes up, it's preemptively. I would rather just hit it head on so they're more receptive. So they start their meeting not like this with their arms folded. And if they are, then maybe by the end, they're a little more receptive and we're having a conversation. And it does feel like preemptively, one of the things I would say if I were Dixie making this pitch is I would throw out a phrase, and I know that this gets associated with him a lot in a negative way. I'm not suggesting that was the way it was presented, but I do see why it would be a genuine concern of his. Do you remember her saying anything about creative control, or perhaps even using different words than that? But the gist being, we understand you need to manage your IP, that you've spent decades, your life's work, building this perception of the way the Hulk Hogan character and persona is presented. And we're asking you if you will lend us your credibility to help build our company, or certainly get it to the next level. So it does feel like there has to be some trust about the way that character would be handled. I think that is a very valid and genuine concern, but I realize the internet wrestling community gets all up in arms when you call that creative control because it's a buzzword. I'm not saying that from a negative perspective, but I am saying if I were Dixie, I would have hit that head on, because if I think that's a concern, I need to put him at ease there. What can you share with us, if anything, about creative control, even if we weren't using that exact phrase?
It certainly wasn't addressed in the first meeting. By the time we started exchanging drafts of agreements, our attorney, Hulk's attorney, made that very clear that Hulk would have creative control. So Dixie did not ever bring it up, at least not in the initial meeting. By the time she saw the legal term creative control as it was defined in the agreement was in our probably response to their first draft. And honestly, it never came up again.
Wow.
It was, I think she knew. I think Jeff knew. Again, you got to understand the context, the circumstances. Even though Hulk didn't carry a grudge and respected Jeff, and I think genuinely liked Jeff as a person, there was still that incident in WCW that involved Vince Russo, who, by the way, was writing for TNA. So when we let the world know, or in this case, Dixie and her attorney, that creative control was something that was non-negotiable, nobody attempted to negotiate it. So she didn't preemptively address it. Once we put it in an agreement, it never came up again. It was never discussed.
Do you remember, and again, we're getting super granular here, and I know I'm probably boring some of our listeners, but do you remember, was there ever a discussion about equity? Was there ever a discussion that, hey, if you can help us get to this point, then we'll cut you in? And before people laugh at that, I want to remind you, at this point, we're like less than 10 years removed from WWE going public. And that's when Vince McMahon was no longer a millionaire, and now he was a billionaire with a B. It's a big opportunity to think big like that. And certainly that's way everybody would have been thinking once upon a time is, hey man, follow the leader. Here's what success in this industry looks like. And along the way, that meant if you're publicly traded, well, lots of people own part of your company. Was the equity discussion ever even broached with you and Hulk about TNA?
Never. And again, this is going to sound negative. Apologize in advance, but I'm giving you my read, my perception at the time, and I think probably turned out to be very accurate. Going back to vision, what you were just suggesting, equity, perhaps going public, thinking about what's referred to in the business as an exit strategy.
Yes.
What those options may look like. All of those are the types of conversations and processes one would go through while developing the vision for your company. Because vision is more than just, I want to be the biggest wrestling company in the world. Okay, cool. How are you going to get there? That's the vision, right? Let's talk about how we get there. I don't think there was ever a vision for TNA to be anything other than a self-sustaining wrestling company that Dixie could run. At all. So there was it never brought up. There was never any conversations afterwards about how do we really build this company. No, let me take that back. I said it wrong. Sure, Dixie and myself and Hulk and Jason Hervey, because I brought Jason into the deal. Jason and I were partners, and when I'm partners with somebody, I'm partners with somebody. And when it became clear that if Hulk was going to come, I was coming with him, and it was time to write my contract, and I was the executive producer eventually on my second contract.
Right.
I made it clear that if I'm going to invest my time in this, then Jason Hervey, who is my partner, will also be a part of this. That's just how we operated. 6 months after we were all on board, a year after we were all on board, and we're having fun and things are going well, we would go out, typically Dixie and I and Jason, sometimes Hulk, not all the time, we would all go over to the Palms bar at the Hard Rock Hotel in Orlando, because that's where we stayed when we were there for production. And, we'd have a couple bottles of wine and, decompress, talk about what happened that night and maybe what's going to happen next week. It was a very positive, fun vibe. And sure, in those situations, we talked about what if, what if we did this? Or you think it's possible we could do this? And Dixie was generally always very positive and optimistic about those conversations, but it became very clear later on that it didn't really matter. She wasn't really running the company. She was the face of the company, and she was active day to day. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to make it sound like she was sitting in her room, playing crossword puzzles in her office. She was active, but the real decisions, the financial decisions, those were not being made really by Dixie. Not on a major level. So that became very clear and quite frustrating, honestly, because and I'm getting ahead of myself here, but after a couple of years of creating opportunities, building certain things, to get just stiff-armed on any form of growth, at that point I said, okay, this is not the place where I want to be. They're very content to have their television show on Spike, to not really tour, to not really do licensing. They paid lip service to it. They brought Hulk in to help accomplish it, but there was no real effort put into any of those things because there never was a vision for that company.
Let's talk a little bit about, when you end the first initial conversation at Dixie's house. At that point, are you just getting the lawyers involved? How long is that process from the first initial meeting at Dixie's place to now we're putting pen to paper? I know I'm asking you to think back, 15 years or so, but what was that period like? Is that a couple weeks, a couple days, a couple months?
I think within 10 days we had our first draft. They put they're trying to remember their attorney's name. His first name is Guy. He's a super dude. Really, really liked working with him, by the way. He's one of the, very few. I've worked with a lot of different attorneys, and some of them are deal makers and some of them are deal breakers. He was a deal maker. He worked really hard to try to make it work. So he was very active, very responsive immediately. Our attorney, who happened to be Jason Hervey's brother, he's an intellectual property attorney at one of the largest firms in California, Los Angeles. He was handling the legal side of Hulk's contract at that time. So the process went really fast and smooth. Quite honestly, it went very smooth.
once you have the contract and you got pen to paper, you sort of said, "Hey, if I'm coming along, then my partner Jason Hervey has to come along." And when we've talked about you in sort of the Dixie seat in WCW, you started to say, and I love this phrase, he got Jimmy Harted into the deal. You would say that, of course, about Jimmy Hart coming with Hulk Hogan alongside a whole host of others, including Earthquake and the Nasty Boys, et cetera, et cetera. Did you think that you and Jason Hervey were getting Jimmy Harted into the Hogan deal here?
Oh, I know we were. Well, I know I was. That was clear in my first meeting. The fact that I was on the freaking plane on my way to Nashville with Hulk made that abundantly clear, because Dixie wasn't interested in Eric Bischoff, and I don't think Jeff was either, to be honest.
Right.
And that's okay. I understand. I really do. If I was in Jeff's shoes, I'm not sure I would want me around either. There was enough drama going on inside of TNA at the time that I didn't even know about. So, no, I knew. It was the only reason I'm sitting on that plane on my way to Nashville is because Hulk made it clear that he's not coming unless I do to watch over his stuff creatively. Again, because Russo was there. So I knew it, and I accepted it. It was fine. There's nothing wrong with getting Jimmy Harted into a deal. Worked out good for Jimmy. He's been working out good for Jimmy for the last 30 freaking years, for God's sake.
Working out great.
Yeah.
Is there any pushback that you know? I mean, do they just know going in, this is, if you want Hulk, this is the deal? Was there any pushback about you and Jason Hervey being a part of this opportunity?
Zero. Zero. And I think part of that was because, number one, they just accepted it. It was like tax. It's like the Hulk tax. And we didn't know at the time that Dixie wasn't writing the check anyway.
Right.
Viacom was, but we didn't know that. Had we known that, it would have been a different deal. Trust me. But I'm sorry, I lost the question. What was it?
Well, I just wanted to know if there was any pushback about you and Jason being Jimmy Harted into the deal.
No, I think it was like the creative control thing. It was just like, okay, that's what we're going to do. Here's how we do that. Let's write the contract accordingly. There was no pushback. Now, maybe internally there was, who knows? I don't think Dixie's mother was a little different. I met her once or twice.
Janice,
yeah. She was like, from what I've been told, because I was around the family once for a Christmas party right after we first started, like within months of when we started. That was one time I was around the family. The only other time, and it wasn't even the rest of the family, was a meeting that Bruce Pritchard and I had in Janice's office down in Dallas about something. But I heard all about Janice, and I think Dixie's dad was kind of like, whatever my daughter wants, we're going to try to help her get it. He was very supportive, very easy to get along with. Janice, on the other hand, was much more of a challenge. I think she was a challenge for Dixie, and I've heard, I was never part of any of these conversations, but I heard directly from people who I trust, implicitly, that it was borderline dysfunctional and really tough on Dixie. Her mom was tough. So there may have been some pushback on that side. There was a guy there by the name of Dean. Oh, he was
Broadhead.
You
didn't like Dean at all, huh?
No, he was a bizarre, former, I think he was a fighter pilot or co-pilot. He was in Vietnam, and he wore that on his sleeve, which is, he should. It's an amazing thing to have done. But he tried a little too hard to impress and intimidate, talking about dropping napalm on villages and listening to the Rolling Stones cranked up in their headsets as they were doing it. kind of stuff just, it sticks out in my mind. You know, there was one point where I was sitting in his office and he pulled out a pistol. It's like cleaning his pistol while he's talking to me. It's like, dude, are you fucking kidding me? Are you trying to intimidate or impress me? It's just weird shit like that. He may have had, Guy Blake was her attorney's name, super guy. He may have had pushback or issues, but at the end of the day, Dixie wanted Hulk. You know, Hulk's coming, Eric's coming. Oh, by the way, so is this guy by the name of Jason Hervey. Now, the easy part of that, as far as pushback goes, Dixie loved Jason. They're still friends. They still stay in touch. And Jason is a very likable guy, much more than I am, for sure. But yeah, there was no pushback that we could see. I don't know what was going on internally. Jeff could probably answer that better than I could.
We got to talk about your role, because we haven't discussed that. I mean, we've said, hey, you're getting Jimmy Harted into the deal. Did they clearly define? I mean, we know that here's the terms of the contract as far as the length of the contract and the compensation, but your role, can you expand on that? What were you supposed to do, and what was Jason supposed to do?
Well, Jason was there really to work with me to land. And Jason worked on a lot of things that didn't have anything to do with Hulk. You know, Jason directed talent a lot. Jason was really good at directing talent because he was a talent at one point. He understood how to talk to a talent and get the best performance possible. You know, you can't coach somebody to do something and try to help somebody to do something if you've never done it yourself. You just can't. Or you can try, but you won't be as good at it. Jason was really, really good at taking talent who had very little experience with the spoken word and, you know, doing promos and that type of thing. And he could get the absolute best out of them while also teaching them so that they could repeat the process again, just giving them techniques and helping them understand how to get that performance across without it feeling so phony. So Jason focused a lot on that type of thing, where I was more involved. And specifically, I was brought on, and I may have been even in my existing or my initial contract, I was there to approve any of the creative that directly or indirectly affected Hulk Hogan. That was my initial role. It expanded in my second contract. And I think that's where I was the executive producer and had kind of an overall view of the show and had input overall. Not necessarily had a creative. I wasn't that. That was still Russo. And when Russo took his ball and went home again, it was Bruce Pritchard who was head of creative. I was just there to kind of oversee the overall product and try to improve it, as well as managing the relationship with the network on a day-to-day basis.
If you're ready to improve the overall product of you need to learn about Lumen. It's the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs. And then it gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, your workouts, your sleep, and even your stress management. All you got to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. And then Lumen will actually give you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on the day's measurements. You can also breathe into your Lumen before and after your workouts and your meals. So you're going to get real-time insights into what's going in your body at that very moment. How cool is that? We've never really had an opportunity like this. And when we vetted this sponsor, my wife lost her mind. She couldn't believe that this technology is available to us, and it's so easy. There's an app that you put on your phone. You breathe into this little rascal, and it gives you real-time feedback of exactly what's going on with your metabolism. There's no such thing as one size fits all. Megan knows that very well through her fitness journey, and she considers this Lumen like a cheat code for her body. And here's why your metabolic health really matters. Think of your metabolism as your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food you eat into the fuel that keeps you going. And because your metabolism really is at the center of everything your body does, Optimal metabolic health translates to a whole host of benefits. Things like easier weight management or improved energy levels, better fitness results, better sleep. Lumen truly does give you recommendations to improve your metabolic health with each breath. So if you're ready to take the next step in improving your health, go right now to lumen.me/83 weeks to get 15% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/83 weeks for 15% off your purchase. And we thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring today's episode. Let's talk a little bit about when you finally come into the company here, Eric, and we've got this new opportunity. Everybody's excited. Hulk's on paper. You're on paper. Jason Hervey's on paper. And from the November 15th television show that happens here in 2009, there's a report in the Observer and in the Torch, and even Jason Powell had it, that this whole my way or the highway speech that Dixie Carter gives to the locker room that airs on television is sort of blurring the lines. She's done these quarterly sort of pep talks to the crew about every 3 months for quite a while. This time, the talent are told, well, we're going to record it. And it actually is going to air on television. And so this is the first time we've seen one of these sort of pep talks like this. And of course, you've never seen one of these prior to this. But this one doesn't wind up being a prep talk. It's a my way or the highway. If you don't like how things are going, it's time for you to go work somewhere else. And this, in the newsletters, is thought to be a shot where she's targeting talent like AJ Styles or Christopher Daniels or Samoa Joe or even Frankie Kazarian. It's been said that Christopher Daniels and AJ Styles have been expressing their frustration with creative, and Samoa Joe is just friends with those guys, so maybe he gets lumped in by association. That's the suggestion by Jason Powell. But he even notes that Frankie Kazarian at this point has already asked for a release. Other people feel like, no, she's not targeting the young talent. She's talking to the older veterans who don't take direction well. There's a quote here. There were so many times when older guys who've been told what they're supposed to do then go out there and go against it just to make themselves look better. This feels like Dixie's trying to, I don't know, get her arms around the problem, but the approach of we're going to film it and air it. What'd you make of this?
Trying to reflect back and determine if I had any influence on that or not. I think I recall Dixie letting me know that she was going to do it. She may have asked my opinion. Just not clear on that one.
It's almost framed, Eric, like she's doing this in advance of the negativity that she perceives might be coming. That, oh God, here comes Hulk Hogan. Now I know that seems silly because it's not like, I mean, almost everyone who was there at some point was influenced by Hulk Hogan in their career. So it's not like they're anti the real life Terry Bollea, but the optics where guys had their contracts trimmed here or there, or they're going to be used fewer dates here or there. And I mean, I guess said differently, no one's making more money than they've ever made before in their entire career in TNA. And we're still here and we're the underdog and we believe in the vision and rah, rah, rah. But after we're being told that, you know, the taping schedule is going to be changed and you're going to get fewer dates and we can't really afford to pay you that. And here comes Hulk Hogan. I could see how there would be a whole lot of guys who were like, hey, wait a minute, right? That's natural.
Yes. Self-preservation and greed kind of kicks in. It's part of the human experience. We all go through it. And again, I don't know what TNA was like before we got there, so it's hard for me to guess why she did it. I think it's natural to assume, like you just did there, that there were a lot of people they loved the fact that this is a small little company and they're homegrown talent and they're getting TV time and there's probably a fair amount of flexibility in the creative because it was just it was an independent wrestling company with a TV deal in that regard. It wasn't a mature, well-structured, well-oiled machine. It was what it was. It was a new company with not a lot of great leadership. There was a lot of drama going on backstage between Jeff and Dixie and Janice and all that. And now, to bring in a guy like Hulk Hogan, and to a much lesser extent, obviously me, I'm sure the talent is going, well, wait a minute. I know the kind of money these guys make. What about me? So I can see that. Don't know if it was true, but it's common sense, I think. It easily could have been the situation.
There's a lot of people who think that, hey, maybe Dixie's doing this because this is the first step in making her a television character. How would you respond to that?
No, I wouldn't buy into that. I think what I thought you were going to go with this may be Dixie's opportunity to take her first step as a real leader.
Okay.
Because I think TNA, my impression again, could be off. It was such an informal environment, and now it was going to require structure. We're bringing in a guy like Hulk Hogan. Guess what? We're going to be under a much different microscope. The expectations are going to be much different. Keep in mind, Viacom was writing the check, not TNA, which means Viacom is going to want to have some more visibility into what's going on because they've got, 7 figures invested in this guy every year, in addition to me and Jason. So I think this was probably Dixie's first real, okay, let's put on our big boy pants and be a legitimate company, as opposed to this fun little thing we do called TNA. Not to be dismissive, but, there was a lot of money invested. There was money spent. There was a lot of hard work, a lot of hard effort. Don't get me wrong. But it was a very informal type of environment. Whereas I think now, again, because of the commitment that Viacom was making and just the attention they're going to get from wrestling fans and everybody else, this was her first opportunity to position herself as a real leader.
Let's talk a little bit about the content of the speech. Wade Keller broke it down on the Torch, which, by the way, if you go to pwtorch.com/VIP and use the promo code Conrad24, you can get all the archives for $1. Your first month is just $1. Use that promo code Conrad24 over at the Torch. He breaks down this speech from Dixie, where she says something along the lines of, since I was named president 6 years ago, I've had a lot of people tell me how to run a wrestling company. While I appreciate their contributions, it's time for a change. Nobody likes drastic change. Nobody likes big moves. I understand that. And it affects different people in different ways. But when you question things in this company, you're questioning me, and I cannot allow that to happen. You have a choice to make. You can choose to support me in the direction TNA is going, or you can choose not to, but you'll need to find another place to work. It's time for us to swing for the fences. It really is. No great success comes without great risk, and I'm great with that. I hope you are too. Now is our time. I look at the faces who have helped make this company, and you've made me very proud. This is a test. I'm asking all of you to step up in every way possible, and let's do this thing together. Now is our time. You need to believe it. If you don't believe it, you're hurting the person sitting next to you. You're hurting me, and you're hurting the fans. If you do believe it, let's do it together and show everybody what we're all about. Listen, I like the idea of a rah-rah speech. But the idea that we film this and we air it, I'm really struggling with. Because if Silva can throw that photo back up there of the group of talent, these guys we're supposed to believe as the viewers at home watching this, that guy in the middle right there wearing the wife beater, that's supposed to be Magnus. But now he's just a guy wearing a shirt here, and he's seated next to other guys that maybe once upon a time he's been in battles with. I don't want to see it like this. This takes me out of it. It kind of reminds me that, hey, this is all a play, and these are the actors in the play, and now we're going to go out here and do a good show. And I recognize that that's what it is. And I would be foolish to try to convince anybody that it was anything other than that. But it just feels like if I'm sitting down to watch an episode of The Sopranos, I don't really want to see James Gandolfini walking around out of character on the show. If I clicked on some sort of a DVD extra thing, I know what I'm getting. But if I'm just watching the show, I'm watching the show as like an escape. I want to be in love with that Tony Soprano character. I'll learn about James Gandolfini another time. What do you think of the decision to air this? I know you're big on blurring the lines. Can you get behind that? It feels weird.
It was very awkward. And I could have gotten behind it if that scene was staged and produced for television and had an intention. What do you hope to get out of it? Why? It always comes back to why. Why are you doing it? Why are you saying it? Why are you thinking it? Why are you feeling it? If you can just boil everything down to a why and you can explain it, you're 3/4 of the way to being successful with whatever it is you're trying to do. In this particular case, because of the narrative, because of the content of what Dixie said, either my way or the highway, and with the shot that Dave put up there, a closer shot, you're looking at the faces of all the talent. They're basically getting chastised.
Yes.
In front of a national television audience. And some of them may have deserved it to be chastised.
Not with an audience. Yes.
But a lot of them didn't. But they're all sitting there getting yelled at by the teacher, and the audience at home has no idea why Dixie is doing this. There's no why there for them. They're just looking at talent sitting there, superheroes, these larger-than-life characters. Presumably, you want them to be that in the eyes of the audience. You're building these guys' characters. You're making them special, or at least attempting to. And now they're sitting there in their T-shirts and their everyday attire getting yelled at for something that the audience doesn't really understand. Not yelled at, chastised for something that the audience they don't know why. This is weird. I think it could have been done differently, and it could have been very effective once you figured out, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this for the audience? I get why we're doing it internally, but you don't have to have cameras there. So if we're not going to do it internally, we're doing it for the viewing pleasure of our audience. What do we hope to get out of this, and how do we get it? I don't think any thought was given to that.
I don't know how I, the viewer, am supposed to receive it. Respectfully, why do I give a shit if TNA's business gets to the next level? Why do I care about TNA's financial success? That's one of the things that's weird about the tribalism today. All this debate, like, I don't know what a P&L for the Sopranos look like. Never cared. Either it's entertaining and it's good and I want to watch another one, or I don't. And that's the end of it. But this rah-rah speech, hey guys, let's make the company better.
Can I interject here what I think?
Yeah.
Not what I know, but what I think. You'll hear me talk about, you've heard me say this before. Dixie wanted, it's my impression, Dixie wanted so badly to be viewed on the same level as Vince McMahon or an Eric Bischoff in the 90s, or even a Paul Heyman. She wanted that recognition and validation so badly that I think, consciously or subconsciously, she knew with Hulk coming in, it could easily be perceived to be Hulk's company. She could lose her spot just by the magnitude of the talent she was bringing in Hulk. This was her opportunity to let the world know that she's the boss. Had nothing to do with what was best for the television show. Had nothing to do with how this message was going to be received by a good portion of the talent that didn't need to hear this speech, but got thrown in to help make Dixie look like a boss. That's why that happened. Dixie wanted to be perceived, much like Tony Khan. Tony Khan wants to be validated, wants to be held in the same type of, I don't want to say respect, obviously, with regard to Vince, because that's all upside down now. But Tony Khan wants to be viewed as a Vince McMahon or a Paul Heyman, or even possibly, probably not so much anymore because of things I've said and done, but Eric Bischoff and the WCW Nitro in the mid 90s. He still makes reference to the fact here and there that, we're WCW 1996. He wants that so badly that I'll go back to Dixie. She wanted that so badly that she actually sacrificed her talent in a way to establish the fact that she's the boss and she's bringing in Hulk Hogan. That's why I think she did it.
Wade Keller suggested, here's perhaps what the speech should have sounded like from Dixie Carter. Wade says this maybe would have worked a little better. Thanks everyone for your contributions and hard work in bringing TNA to the level it has achieved. By adding Hulk Hogan to our team in a role yet to be determined, your profile and the profile of this company will be raised. I'm personally excited for more fans than ever to witness the best brand of pro wrestling out there. All I ask of you is to continue to try to be the best wrestlers you can be. If you try to win your matches, I'll do my best to create an environment where the best wrestlers get rewarded and that cheating and unsportsmanlike conduct is not tolerated. Those who are the best at what they do will be rewarded with title matches, and we'll continue to seek out the best wrestlers in the world. And if you lose too many matches, you'll be out and replaced with someone who wins, because we want our fans to know that they're going to be rewarded with seeing the best wrestlers in the world competing on the best stage anywhere. So Wade's suggesting we do it in kayfabe. We talk about it like, it's not, that's the type of speech that Dana White would give as the leader of the UFC. It wouldn't say, guys, you got to work together and let's have more entertaining matches. And if you're not on board, hit the bricks, pal. Like, the whole thing is a little weird, especially with the understanding that when Hogan comes in, it's sort of going to be positioned like Hogan versus Dixie, but Dixie's supposed to be the baby face in that. But how is she the baby face if she's perceived as talking down to the talent? The whole thing's a real head scratcher with the benefit of hindsight to me, Eric.
Yeah. And Wade's version of that speech actually could have worked really well, in part, not because it was that well written, although it was, but that would be more Dixie. The speech that we saw, that is so antithetical to who Dixie Carter really is and the way she talks and the way she interacts with people, that it wasn't real. It wasn't genuine, which made it harder. When this show started, she is generally a really good human being and a nice person. I meant that. And the speech that she gave in the beginning, her I want to be the boss speech, I'll refer to it as, was not a reflection of who she is or how she had been conducting herself with talent up until that point. So it was such an abrupt change that it made it even harder, I think, for the talent to accept and digest. It was very weird. It was weird. And I think, Wade's approach would have worked because it was more, that's what Dixie would have said in real life, as opposed to my way or the highway. That's not Dixie. And that's, people you hear the word authenticity and being authentic and being true to yourself. And those are all really cool words. And generally people knows what that means or know what it means. But when you're not authentic, particularly in a case like this, particularly when you're on television, it's so obvious to people that it makes whatever it is you're trying to sell that much harder to buy.
Let's talk a little bit about how that speech may have came together. There's been a narrative out there, and it was talked about in the newsletters all the time, that Vince Russo was a big advocate behind the scenes for making Dixie an on-screen character. And she was always, allegedly, reluctant to do so. I can't help but wonder, do you think this is just Russo going back to what he knows? The thing that made WWE successful and sort of stop the 83 weeks run that WCW was on was Mr. McMahon versus Stone Cold. So there was, a power dynamic there at play. And then we saw him try something in the same vein a little bit in WCW with the New Blood versus the Millionaires Club. And it does feel like that's maybe what he's trying to set up here. And you said, hey, what she's saying in the speech there, what she actually said is antithetical to who she really is. We don't know. I wasn't there. You weren't there. Do you think that maybe Vince Russo wrote this speech?
Conrad, I had never considered that until just now, listening to you. I would bet a lot that that's exactly because, and I'm focusing on it's either my way or the highway.
Yes, that's not her.
That is so not Dixie Carter. And until you get to know Dixie a little bit, you can't understand just how much that is not Dixie Carter. And now that you brought it to my consciousness, fuck yeah, that was Vince Russo, because that's Vince Russo's voice. That's how Vince Russo wishes he could be. He's actually kind of he's not a very strong person mentally or emotionally. He's very, very weak. He gets intimidated easily. He gets emotional very easily. He cracks under pressure very, very easily. He wishes he could be a Vince McMahon back when he was working for Vince, or an Eric Bischoff, or anybody else who has the balls to confront people or situations and not be afraid to be aggressive about it. Vince wishes he could be that, but he's not. So he does the next best thing. He puts those words in other people's mouths. And you hit it right on the head, man. That was a Vince Russo speech. Now, you suggested in there that deep down inside, Russo was trying to, get Dixie to be a character. I've never really bought into that a whole lot, but now it's so funny doing these shows, how things just kind of fall into place because of a different perspective like yours. But it kind of all makes sense, especially the way you framed it. Yeah, that was Vince Russo talking. This idea was probably a Vince Russo idea. Definitely the dialogue was a Vince Russo, because it's not Dixie. I mean, it's just so not Dixie. And it is so much Vince Russo. That's exactly what happened, which is why it didn't work. He didn't write for her voice. He wrote for his voice, because he's living out his fantasy through her. That's exactly what that was.
Well, maybe it's time you live out some fantasies with our friends at Blue Chew. Think of it as a hot tag for your wiener. Blue Chew is an online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but at a fraction of the cost and in a chewable form. The process is simple. You sign up at BlueChew.com and you consult with one of their licensed medical providers. And once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA, prepared and shipped directly to your door. And the best part, well, it's all done online. That means no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversation, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. You can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. And Blue Chew wants to help you have the confidence to perform at your best. So discover your options at BlueChew.com. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code 83weeks at checkout. Just pay the $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com. The promo code is 83weeks to receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring today's podcast. So, Eric, one of the next big things that happens on camera is we see an interaction with Dixie Carter and Sting. And when Sting comes, there's a big pop. He's going to be a big part of the program here. Flair's here, Hogan's here. And of course, we've got to throw Sting into the mix. But what's interesting about the way they're positioning Sting with regard to Dixie is that Sting has turned twice in his career. Back in WCW, it lasted for a hiccup, didn't work. And then a year prior to this, he was supposed to be a heel, and he turned down all the ideas that would have made him get a lot of boos. So he became a babyface in a heel faction, the Main Event Mafia. And now we're going to try it again here. And Dixie confronts him backstage, as you saw there. And Sting grabs her and shoves her up against the wall and says that, and screams, he owes her nothing. And she refers to Sting as Steve, which means now we're shooting, brother. Boy, the Vince Russo fingerprints are all over this, aren't they?
Yes.
Sting turning heel is never going to work. It's never worked. It's never going to work. Like, thankfully, I don't think we have to worry about that now, but I guess Russo's sort of getting his wish here. He's trying some things. and Dixie's on TV. He thought she'd be a great television character. What'd you think? I mean, almost immediately you're seeing creative like this that had to make you think, what year is it? Is this 2000? Is this WCW? What's going down?
Yeah, this was, and again, in the very beginning, I wasn't focused on any of the other creative other than Hulk's. So if there was another talent in the show, let's say it was Christopher Daniels and Frankie Kazarian in a tag team storyline with somebody else, and if they were referencing Hulk Hogan, I'd want to see that narrative and approve it. Because the issue with Russo is he went into business for himself despite his protestations to otherwise. He went into business for himself. And that was our concern with Russo. And I made sure that if Hulk's name was used in a narrative on the show, that we at least knew the context and what it was about. Otherwise, you got people making romances and challenging Hulk in interviews, and we're not even a part of that discussion or aware of what's going on. So that was my role. I'm going to work with Vince Russo, who's going to lay out his ideas for what he wants to do with Hulk. I'm going to get involved in that process, either approve it or modify it or shit can it or anything in between. Anything else that was going on in the show, I didn't pay any attention to it. I mean, I was aware of it, don't get me wrong, but it was not my job. That was Russo's job. I didn't want that job. I didn't want to be in charge of creative for the whole show. It wasn't my interest at all. In fact, I was quite clear that was not going to be my job, even contractually. So a lot of the stuff that was going on, like you just said, I was aware of it, but again, not my responsibility. But to your point, again, right on the money, you can just smell Vince Russo's creative. You can walk into a room. If there is a format sitting on a table, when you walk into that room, you're going to smell Vince Russo's name all over that format. I'm not saying it's always bad, but there's a certain style, there's a tone, there's just a lot that is really easy to identify as a Vince Russo project or a Vince Russo script or an idea. And this was one of them. Again, using, real name. Why? Well, again, why would you do that? Because you're trying to appeal to guys like Dave Meltzer or the people that read them.
Well, I don't even know that you're trying to appeal there, Eric. I think we're trying to position it. Like, what's the old Johnny Valentine? I can't make them believe that wrestling's real, but I can damn sure make them believe I'm real. And so it feels like, okay, now we know that this is just a wrestling show, but right there, now that's real. And
maybe
I get the selective use of that, but I mean, let's see the picture of him confronting Dixie again. That's real. This guy's walking around dressed up in his vigilante outfit, and now we're shooting, bruh. Like, if he's in flip-flops and a backwards baseball cap, now it's real. But this dude, he ain't checking the mail dressed like this. This ain't Steve. Like, the whole thing is silly. And by the way, this is the payoff for a crazy match that feels like a fever dream. AJ Styles was teaming with Ric Flair to take on Hulk Hogan and Abyss on television. I don't know how in the world that ever even, this is the worst use of AJ Styles and Abyss ever, right? They're not going to get over. I understand the old school where you're going to use the more established talent, but look at AJ doing a dime store Ric Flair robe right there. The whole thing is just, oh man, it's a miss for me with the benefit of hindsight. What'd you think about it at the time though, Eric?
I didn't hate it, but I was not excited about it.
Yeah.
Part of the reason that happened, Hulk absolutely fell in love with Abyss.
Yeah.
As a person. And rightfully so. There is not many people you'll meet in the wrestling business that is as genuine and honest and just as good of a person as Chris. He is a real sweetheart of a human being on every level. And Hulk has always liked big men. You know, he just, because again, what worked for Hulk, what he knew, you know, the success that he had created was always around big guys. And Abyss was that big guy in TNA. And then you combine that with just the genuine affection that Hulk had for Chris. Hulk wanted to do, I mean, he gave him his Hall of Fame ring. I mean, Hulk Hogan turned himself inside out to try to help get Abyss over. And that was a big part of why this was happening. Hulk believed, and I went along with, by the way, I'm not fading the heat to Hulk, but Hulk really believed that for AJ to go from AJ Styles, you know, homegrown, you know, wrestler from Georgia, to becoming a major star, that he had to become a bigger character, not a better wrestler, but a bigger character. Now, you can argue that having him be Little Nate was not necessarily the best idea, but I think Hulk was right. His instinct was correct, that in order for AJ to become what AJ had the potential even back then of becoming, that he had to step out of I'm the homegrown Georgia boy and become a bigger star. And this was an attempt to do it. So on the surface, yes, it's weird looking. It's fever dreamish, as you put it. But there was a thought process behind it that was mostly correct. It was not executed probably the way it should have been, but the intention, the idea was a good one.
We got to talk about something that you and I have not spent any time talking about. And I know you've been traveling, so you may not have even had a chance to check and see what all's in the format for our show today, because truth be told, we have a little research team that puts together a lot of research in order to help us pull these shows together. And we're going to be talking about somebody who I don't believe you're a huge fan of. I'm talking about the real life Todd Clem. We know him as Bubba the Love Sponge, and he gets himself fired by Dixie Carter. And it's because he did a radio interview where he ambushed a wrestler who performed under the name Awesome Kong on his radio show in Tampa. Bubba the Love Sponge used to have a huge syndicated network of radio stations, and then eventually he made the leap to Sirius XM, and now he's back in terrestrial radio. And in this era, he was doing some stuff with TNA. I guess he too had been Jimmy Harted into the deal. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it was a little different situation though, because Bubba brought a massive radio footprint to the table. He wasn't just there because he was a buddy of Hulk's. That was a part of it, no question. But there was a massive amount of added value for a young company struggling to get attention.
He was known for doing stunts, and he's going to do a stunt here with Awesome Kong, I guess. And I don't know all the particulars. They had some sort of a run-in at television, and now he's going to air it out on the radio. And that is a page right out of his and Howard Stern's book. They want to be authentic. They want to talk about what's really going on in their life on the radio, warts and all. And this just gets ugly, where they have her, and I don't even know that she knows this is happening, discussing how much money she's making and where she's moving and all this stuff. And then Bubba jumps in on the interview and starts calling her names. Lots of unpleasant names. We're not going to repeat them all, but he even uses one where it's like, wow, I don't think you should be doing that. Dixie felt the same way. And 2 days later, she's fired. Not she's fired. He's fired. Bubba the Love Sponge gets his walking papers 2 days after this outburst, where he is challenging Awesome Kong to a fight. And he's saying that he's going to put up $5,000 and he's going to give the money to Haiti, who just had a huge natural disaster that was clearly something they had discussed in real life. She's frustrated, hangs up the phone. It was a gotcha deal. I'm sure Bubba thought this will make for great radio. And if you were a fan of that program, it probably did. But he clearly went about this the wrong way. And I'm sure you're sort of in the middle of this. You weren't in the studio. It's not like you're even listening to the program. You don't live in Tampa. But when you hear about this, I'm sure you've got to do some cleanup somewhere with relationships and hurt feelings, because this is Hulk's buddy. Talk to me about this whole Bubba the Love Sponge, Awesome Kong situation.
Yeah, honestly, I didn't get in the middle of it. It was Hulk's. Yeah, the relationship obviously was with Hulk and Bubba, and Hulk did Bubba's show. In fact, I used to cringe. I'd be in LA. I'd be, on business in between meetings, and I'm listening. Sometimes I had to pull over on the side of the road because I don't think Hulk would mind if I say this. I think he's pretty much admitted to a lot of this. He was drinking really heavy. Again, this was during that time when he was undergoing the back surgeries, the issue with his son, the divorce, all of this. I'm not making excuses. It just was real.
Yeah.
He was medicated, by his doctors, legitimate prescriptions for shit that would kill a horse or two. And he would top it off with a quart of Tito's in the morning on the way to the studio, Bubba's. So there were often times when I'd pull over on the side of the road and I'm hearing, and Bubba's feeding it. Of course, this is great radio for Bubba. Hulk wasn't himself. His judgment was definitely impaired between the pharmaceuticals and the alcohol and just the stress and the drama and the pain and all the rest of it. He was not thinking clearly at all. He was not himself. And he was saying and doing things on the radio that I just knew a year or two before that he would never, ever say or do. But it was like Bubba's radio show was his voice. It was a way for him to lash out. It was a way for him to respond to people, including his ex-wife, who was just running her mouth at every opportunity and doing whatever she could to embarrass and humiliate him. And Bubba provided a platform for Hulk to respond. And he did on a regular basis. And it hurt him. It hurt his reputation. I think it hurt the perception of people had of him. And again, if that was really who he was, that's what you get. But he was not. Bubba was taking advantage of him, in my opinion, exploiting him by being his friend or convincing him that Bubba was his best buddy, and then allowing him to go on the radio for Bubba's benefit and say things and embarrass himself in ways that he should have, Bubba, if he was really a friend, would have never, ever, ever let him do. I couldn't do anything about it. I tried to talk to Hulk a couple times, but no, brother. This was his opportunity to vent, and Bubba had a huge footprint. He was right up there with Howard Stern for a while. He was part of Howard Stern's network. So I just kind of stepped back and let whatever happened happen. I wasn't emotionally involved in it. I wasn't technically involved in it. It wasn't part of my job to manage Bubba the Love Sponge or what he did or said. But it was a horrible situation. Didn't it end up? Didn't she beat his ass?
Well, that's what started it. There was a physical confrontation, and then he attacks her on the radio like this, and it got ugly.
Because she embarrassed the hell out of him.
Yes.
I think she'd have kicked his ass, quite honestly, if they'd have let it go.
Well, that's the reason they got to this whole, hey, let's have a fight. I'll come to your place right now. And she's even giving her address over the radio. And as the producer is saying, oh, well, just go down there and take care of it then. Y'all go fight. Think about the absurdity of that, a man and a woman fighting, or just adult humans fight. What are we doing? But then, as if that's not enough, he doubles down on some of the, oh, he shouldn't say that, where he goes, oh, I don't want to go to the hood. So then he gets fired 2 days later. Dixie sends him an email saying that they have a zero tolerance policy for racial insensitivity, and he's shown the door. And he goes on a rant and calls Dixie a mark bitch on the radio. and says that he's made sure that he's thoroughly buried Awesome Kong to Johnny Ace, and there's no way WWE will take her. And he even shares some uncomfortable details that Terry Taylor had told him in confidence about some issues Awesome Kong had been having mentally or emotionally. He's airing all of this out and saying the TNA product is beneath me anyway. And it's not like this is going to hurt any of your sponsors because nobody wants to advertise with such a horrible product. Nobody's even going to notice. I was doing you a favor. That is the attitude in all of this. And just knowing that you're supposed to be the Hulk Hogan whisperer for whatever reason, however we want to call that, and knowing this is his friend, this puts Hulk in a bad spot here too. And I don't think Bubba even considered that when he was doing any of this. Do you?
Absolutely not. Bubba's only concern was Bubba. That's why he was putting like I said, convinced Hulk that he was, one of his best friends, and then just allowing him to go on his radio show and say things and do things that were put Hulk in a bad light. But he didn't care. He let him do it. He encouraged him to do it. He fired him up. He stirred the pot. He made sure he got a great show out of it, regardless of how it affected anybody else.
Once upon a time when Bubba was on satellite radio, I didn't listen all the time. I've always been a Howard Stern guy, but there were segments that I enjoyed on Bubba's radio show. I've never met him. I don't know him at all, but this is a bad look. Do you have, I know that there's a lot of people who just don't like anything about Bubba the Love Sponge. And I understand that. That's part of the character he's played. It's probably well earned. Was there ever a time where you and Bubba were friendly? I understand the ultimate falling out with him and Hulk and where you landed on that whole deal. But at any point, were you friendly with Bubba the Love Sponge before things got sideways?
Friendly, yes. Friends, no. Meaning, because he was tight with Hulk, because Hulk spent a lot of time with him, I would go down to Tampa, and if I was with Hulk for 3 or 4 days, whatever it was, inevitably there was a trip at least once or twice down to the radio station or the studio where Bubba worked and had his business. And I was around it, and Bubba had some talented guys working with him that I found to be fun and entertaining to be around. So I was friendly with him, but I never associated with him outside of his studio. We didn't have a phone relationship. We didn't text each other back and forth. It was simply, he's a friend of a friend. So, a friend of a friend, I guess, is a friend of mine, so to speak.
Let's talk a little bit about Paul Heyman, because later in 2010, we'll call it the summer of 2010, is when there's lots of rumors out there that Dixie Carter is trying to land Paul Heyman to book the company. And she even pushes something out there like, you'll never guess who I just met with. Well, that was Paul Heyman. And it's said internally, TNA felt like a deal was imminent. And Jeff Jarrett even starts hinting around about a new identity. And there's going to be a new person, coming in. This is, of course, when they're going to do yet another ECW reunion show. We know that ultimately Paul Heyman does not make the jump. And I've been under the impression and seeing interviews from Paul Heyman since that one of the things he was adamant about is he didn't want to just be the booker. He needed to be able to control the roster. Think about it from a football standpoint. He wanted to be able to be the general manager and the head coach. He wants to have the type of control he had in ECW where he can decide not just what the characters are doing, but what characters he has. And I've heard that one of the things he was big on, if he would have gotten control with TNA, is he wanted to get rid of everyone who was north of 40. He wanted to go into a youth movement. He wanted younger guys. And if you recall the way ECW was originally successful, they had one veteran, if you will, and Terry Funk, and the rest of the talent were younger guys that were sort of quote unquote homegrown. Do you remember these Paul Heyman discussions, and were you involved in any of those conversations with Dixie Carter, good, bad, or indifferent, about Heyman and TNA?
I was not involved in any of the conversations. I was aware the conversations were taking place, much like I was when Dixie tried to bring in Jim Ross. I'm the one that actually gave Dixie Jim Ross's phone number so she could give him a call. So I was aware, but I was not involved at all.
Do you think, what do you think of that idea that if Heyman were to come in, we know he didn't, but if we could fantasy book, what if, would that have been interesting or exciting for you as a wrestling fan to see what Paul Heyman could have done with all the talent that was in TNA at the time?
Yeah, of course. I mean, look, I was friends with Paul. Paul and I, I've known Paul since 1987. So we kind of go back a ways. I first met Paul when he was working with Vern Gagne, the AWA. He was a promoter working. Paul was working with a guy by the name of Rob Russin at the time, and basically trying to sell AWA to state fairs and county fairs and independent promoters and things like that. That was Paul's role. So I didn't interface much with Paul. He was in one world, I was in another world in the AWA syndication. But I certainly got to know him a little bit, and then obviously worked together in WWE, where we actually became pretty good friends. And I knew Paul had a lot of ability. I found him to be fascinating from a creative perspective, and I was certainly excited about the idea of another voice coming in. Now, I was unaware until after the fact that he wanted to fire everybody over 40, which contractually would have made it a little difficult because there were a lot of guys in that, well, not a lot, but there were some very, very high paid guys in that category, including Hulk Hogan, which, by the way, Viacom wanted to keep on. So, Paul's idea would have probably met with some resistance had he tried to execute it. But I didn't find out about any of that until after the fact. But I was excited about it. Paul and I have always, we've always talked about, wow, wouldn't it be? I mean, when I went to WWE in 2019, I don't think anybody was more excited about me being there than Paul. We were really looking forward to the opportunity when I indeed had SmackDown and he indeed had Raw, and we could collaboratively work together. That never occurred because Paul never really had Raw and I never really had SmackDown. Vince McMahon was just overseeing both, and it was all his show and his idea. But we talked a lot about, how exciting it would be to put our heads together, because I think we complemented each other. Did I have the same level of desire to work with Paul back in 2010 as I did in 2019? Probably not, but still enough respect for Paul that I was looking forward to working together. I mean, my contract was solid. I had like 3 years on my deal, so I wasn't like insecure in any way. More looking forward to it.
It is one of those great what ifs. What if Paul Heyman had come into TNA in 2010? One of those what ifs we don't have to worry about is Henson. If you were born after 1970, there's a very good chance that the first razor you ever owned was a multi-blade razor. These razors have just been the status quo for over half a century, but where's that gotten us? According to a recent study, 2/3 of men have some form of irritation when they shave, and there's virtually no information on how to prevent irritation, only on how to treat it. So as a result, there's over 2 billion plastic razors that enter the landfill each year in the US alone. And this whole razor/razor blade model leads to high operating costs, and more people either opt to stop shaving or explore other invasive hair removal methods. And that's why the mission statement from Henson is so awesome. They want to change the shaving industry, not through gimmicky subscriptions or moisturizing strips, but through groundbreaking research on the impact that shaving has on your skin. And here's the dirty secret about the razor industry. Even the cheapest dollar store disposable razor will give you a reasonably smooth shave. The trick is in removing the hair without any negative outcomes for your skin. Meaning, can we do it without irritation or razor burn or ingrown hairs or razor bumps? Henson wants to change the paradigm away from getting a smooth shave to, now let's call it what it is, getting a skin-friendly shave. And when Henson is looked at with all the other razors, they are noticing a consistent lack of blade support. Basically, the blades just have too much flex or bend. Think of anything that you might cut with a pair of scissors or a kitchen knife. You don't want the blade to be moving when you're using it. You're going to have less control. Well, Henson's razors are designed to hold the blade still, so there's less bend and there's less wobble. The precision is where it's all about. And the way Henson's able to do this is because they have an aerospace machine shop up in Canada that's also made parts for the Mars rover and the International Space Station. And the Henson machinists are exceptional at manufacturing. And that level of precision is one of the big reasons their razors are just so much gentler on your skin. The blade plane extends just 0.0013 inches. That's less than the thickness of a human hair. And here's the best part. Not only is it a better, more skin-friendly shave, it's also cheaper. The Henson razor works with a standard dual-edged blade that costs less than 10 cents each. And once you own a razor, it's only like $3 to $5 a year to replace the blades. The razor itself is made out of aluminum, and there's no plastic. There's not even any plastic in the packaging. This is the best razor we've ever used. We've had lots of different razor sponsors on the program. I just want to be honest about that. But I've never had one I believed in as much as I did Henson. Yes, they sent us one to try, but then I went and picked one up to travel with and one for the beach house. I have 3 Hensons now. I even turned my barber onto this. She uses it for all of her shaves now. She's been in the razor game for like 30 years. She could not believe the classic old school manly feel of this blade, but also what a great job it does. I mean, you're going to know quality when you hold it in your hand. I can't say enough nice things about Henson. I believe in the company. I believe in the science. I believe in the product. And I want you right now to say no to subscriptions and say yes to a razor that will last you a lifetime. Head on over to hensonshaving.com/Bischoff to pick the razor for you and use the code Bischoff, and you'll get 2 years worth of blades free with your razor. Just be sure to add them to your cart. That's 100 free blades when you head on over to hensonshaving.com/Bischoff and use the code Bischoff. Let's get back to it. We're going to talk a little bit about what's next here in the Dixie Carter saga, and it is this ECW angle. We're doing yet another reunion show for ECW. In 2005, we had Hardcore Homecoming, and then we had the One Night Stand. In 2006, we're going to do our second One Night Stand and then launch our own ECW promotion under the WWE banner. And 4 years after that one fizzled, TNA wants to do it again. This perhaps is the worst possible ECW reunion. I was excited about it in 2005. I went to Hardcore Homecoming and One Night Stand. I was considerably less excited about it in 2006. And I had no interest in this one in 2010. I don't think a lot of people did. Is this the straw that broke the camel's back, do you think, with ECW reunion shows, this TNA Hardcore Justice version?
It should have. If it didn't, it should have. Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. I don't know who actually booked it. I think it was former ECW that actually booked the whole thing. It wasn't even Russo. Can't even blame this on Russo or me. It was
Bully and Tommy.
Huh?
Bully and Tommy.
Some combination thereof.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't good. And part of it was it's TNA. That's another thing, and I keep going back to it, and people probably are tired of hearing it, but in a soundstage environment, the authenticity we're talking about, the energy, even the crowd that's there, these are not ECW type fans. These are people that are spending a fortune buying a ticket to get into the park and go to the Back to the Future ride. This is not a hardcore audience. Just everything about it was wrong on the surface. I understand why they did it, and emotionally all those guys are still, to this day, Bully and I joke about it. I don't talk to too many other people that were a part of ECW, but I do talk to Bully quite a bit. We're very close, very good friends. And there's a certain feeling that these guys had about ECW that's never going to go away. It was an important part of their lives and their careers, and it was an important moment in time in the wrestling business. But that moment in time had long since passed, and to try to put that square peg, which what the ECW style was, into the incredibly round hole that TNA was and Viacom was at the time, it was just a bad idea to start with.
Well, what is interesting note in all of this is while all this ECW stuff is going on, it's in the newsletters that you and Hulk Hogan are not even at TV. So you're not burning dates. There's also a report that Hulk's going to need to get yet another back operation. And now they're saying this might actually be the end. He's not going to wrestle again. And allegedly there'd been matches with Abyss at Bound for Glory in October. And then later in the year with Sting. Do you remember those being on the books and then just not coming to fruition because of Hulkster's back operation?
Yep. And Hulk wanted to do those. I mean, I don't think he was contractually required to do anything in the ring. I mean, wrestle. But it's what he wanted to do, especially with Abyss and Sting. There was no way it was going to happen.
And it's kind of crazy to think too, because, we do get that Abyss and Hulk Hogan against AJ Styles and Ric Flair match in March of 2010. And then we get Bound for Glory with Sting and Hulk Hogan in 2011. I don't think enough people talk about this. Hulk Hogan's last two matches that he ever wrestled were on non-televised house shows, live events for TNA in 2012. There were 6-man tags with Hulk Hogan teaming with James Storm and Sting to take on Bobby Roode, Bully Ray, and Kurt Angle in Manchester, England. They saw the very last Hulk Hogan match. That just feels weird to say, doesn't it? Not on TV.
It does, but I'm glad it turned out that way.
Really?
I'm glad it was, because because it wasn't televised, you could just go out there and have fun. I'm not just talking about Hulk. I mean, everybody could go out there and perform for the crowd and not the cameras. And that changes things. And I'm sure Hulk had a great time. I'm sure he was in a ton of pain, obviously, but I'm also confident that he had the best time he could possibly have. It was a hot crowd. It wasn't a massive crowd, but it was a very, very hot crowd. And they appreciated it. It was a fun night in many respects. But I'm glad it wasn't on television, because it wouldn't have been as much fun had it been on TV.
I know you said he wanted to do it. You don't think he was contractually obligated, talking about the Hulk Hogan Abyss match and the Hulk Hogan Sting match. We do get that Hulk Hogan Sting match, Bound for Glory, October 16th, 2011. That's really the only big one. He had that tag match on TV we talked about, and then this one with Sting. In a perfect world, do you think Hulk Hogan would have really liked to have done that Abyss match? I mean, I could hear the love in your voice of just, the way the real life Terry Bollea felt about the real life Chris Park. Do you think he thought, hey, I can help this guy get over, and we just never got there?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He really believed in Abyss. I mean, if he could have adopted him, he would have.
Let's talk a little bit about the next big meeting that we're going to have here in 2010. It's when Dixie gets all the talent together, and they're having a discussion. Of course, everybody wants to know what's going on with Paul Heyman, and she's trying to keep everybody at bay here. And she says they need to tighten up their in-ring work, and that they're all becoming spoiled because the shows were taped. I find that interesting. Like, isn't that the advantage for it being taped? Like, I understand that you're working without a net when you're on live television, but did you feel like talent were phoning it in at times in TNA because it was taped? Is that a fair criticism? Because it feels like it's really random by Dixie.
And it's the opposite of my impression and experience. TNA talent worked their asses off. Some of them were better than others, of course, because some had more experience than others, or natural talent. AJ Styles, Frankie Kazarian, Chris Daniels, to name a few. Very, very, very talented guys physically. But there were a lot of talents there that, while they might not have been as talented, because again, experience and repetitions, there's nobody that didn't work their asses off. I was never under the impression that anybody phoned anything in there.
Let's talk a little bit about, the ins and outs, the day-to-day life for you and Dixie Carter. I know that you spent some time in Orlando at the TV tapings. Did you spend much time at all in Nashville?
Yeah. In the very beginning, of course, I would fly in. I think they were doing, I don't think I flew in every week, maybe every other week. I can't really remember, but I was in a booking meeting with the team starting day one, again, because of overseeing Hulk Hogan stuff. So I would come into Nashville, usually on Sunday nights, and be there Monday and Tuesday and go home Wednesday. But yeah, I spent a lot of time. No, I didn't really hang out with, I didn't spend any time with Dixie when I was in Nashville. It was typically I was in the office and doing, like I said, with the creative team. Go back to my hotel, do it again the next day, jump on a plane and go home. So the only time I really saw Dixie was at TV. I didn't really see her at all in Nashville.
When you're working in concert with Dixie, like, are there any good memories? Like when you think back on a business initiative, a creative idea, producing a segment, can you just speak to some of the things you may have worked with Dixie on and tell us what that was like? You guys working together as collaborators, if you will.
I enjoy Dixie because for all the reasons I talked about in the beginning of this episode. She's a very authentic, genuine, very, very nice human being who I think her intentions are all honorable and good. I think she was in over her head trying to be something that she didn't have any experience in or instinct for. Tony Khan, there's a lot of similarities there. Doesn't make them bad people or not smart people. It's like me trying to become a concert, flutist. It's not going to ever happen. But when I did work with Dixie, particularly as it related to, there was a couple things. Viacom wanted to see what's referred to as a show Bible. Now, in any other form of television, episodic television, a show Bible is like, okay, you got to have pencils in your drawer and you got to have pens in your drawer. It's a tool of the trade. In wrestling, what's a show Bible? Because wrestling typically is fly by the seat of your pants from a creative point of view, as opposed to episodic TV, where you really have to plan 8 weeks in advance or 13 weeks. You have to have the full series fleshed out before you go into production. That's normally how television is produced. In wrestling, it's week to week to week, and the network is very rarely, if ever, involved. That started to change with Viacom. And they wanted to see a show Bible, which meant that we had to sit down and figure out 13 weeks of television over the course of about a week or 10 days. And we would literally go off site. And I think the last time we went to it was a horrible place, but we went to some place in the Pocono Mountains. It was an old lodge. And, it was probably really cool back in the 50s, but it was old and run down in the middle of nowhere and whatever. But we would huddle up in a room, big meeting room, and we'd have our talent on a big whiteboard, names of all the talent. We start ranking them or, segmenting them based on, are they A story talent? Are they B story talent? C story talent? Where are they on the storytelling food chain as characters, so to speak? And then we would just start with a blank piece of paper. What are we going to do for the next 13 weeks? And by the time we were done, we literally had a Bible that we could hand over to the network that would show you exactly where all of our A talent, how they're going to play out over the course of 13 weeks, highlights of, the matches, the story behind the matches, why we're doing what we're doing. All of that was laid out for almost the entire active roster. That was a big undertaking. Nobody in TNA had ever done it before. Vince Russo had never heard of the idea before because he's never worked in television outside of working for Vince and WCW. So it was kind of overwhelming for a lot of people. Jason and I loved it because that's what we love to do. And Dixie was a part of that. She was nervous about it because it was an unknown and she didn't know how it was going to go, but she was very supportive of it. And once she saw it, I think she got very, very comfortable with that process. So I loved that process and loved bringing Dixie into it because it showed her a different way of approaching the business, the wrestling business, aside from what she had been doing with Russo and what everybody else is doing, including, Tony Khan. It's probably the same way they're producing television today. And it didn't work for Dixie and it's not working for Tony, but this was a solution to that problem. I'd love to I think Kevin Sullivan, the producer, not the late great Kevin Sullivan, I still think he sent me a text saying he had a copy of one. I'd love to go back and look at that and see it because it would also be a great tool for anybody that's producing wrestling to look at, to just get an idea of perhaps how you should produce television. Not that it wouldn't change, because you plan 13 weeks of television, you turn it into the network, they sign off on it. 2 days later, somebody, blows out a knee or is thrown in jail or decides to become a monk or whatever. Life happens, shit happens, contracts happen or don't happen. So there's always going to be changes, but it's nice to have a starting point. It's a lot easier to adjust on the fly if you've got a plan in place already and you're just modifying the plan as opposed to rewriting television from the ground up. That was a fun process. A lot of the conversations that we had, I know it sounds, all you did was, drink wine and hang out with Dixie. That's not the case. But there were those times after a show when you're fired up, your adrenaline's, coming out your ears and you had a great show. You're not ready to go back, watch the news and fall asleep. You're fired up. And there was just so many great conversations that we had. Some of it creative, some of it directly related to business. The rest of it just talking about our kids and things that we like to do. Those are really fun times that I had with Dixie and Jason and Hulk to a degree. He wasn't often there, but yeah, there were a lot of good times with Dixie that I remember. I remember meeting her and her husband, Serge, down in Tampa. They were down there at the same time Lori and I were down there. We just all went out and had a drink or two on the beach and didn't talk at all about wrestling. So there's a lot of good memories with regard to Dixie. I will tell you that, my ability to bring my son in and have him start out as a referee, Jackson James, nobody even half 3/4 of the people that were on location in the roster didn't even know Garrett was my son. We kept it that quiet. Sting knew, obviously Hulk knew, Jason knew, but the rest of the roster, they didn't know Garrett. They never met him before. So when I brought him in as a referee, we named him Jackson James. Like Garrett and I wouldn't socialize together in catering. I would ignore him. If he walked by me, if we crossed paths walking, to and from the set, I'd just pretend he didn't exist. So we kept that up for a long time. That was fun. Dixie helped make that happen. She allowed that to happen. And me getting a chance to work with my son. It's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my career, creatively. Dixie allowed that to happen. She could have said no. She didn't. So I'll always be grateful for those opportunities. Just because I'm honest about some of the shortcomings or things that I saw as shortcomings doesn't mean that I don't like Dixie. Didn't like Dixie. I do. She's a wonderful human being that provided me a really meaningful opportunity to work with my son that I'll never forget, and neither will Garrett.
Yeah. So there you go. It's not going to be all bad on today's show. And I like that you're able to look back and think about the happier times. And I think about the happier times whenever I pour a big bowl of cereal on the weekends, plop down and watch some wrestling, just like I did when I was a kid. But now I know I don't need all that sugar. I need more protein in the morning. And Megan found Magic Spoon. If you're already a Magic Spoon fan, I got big news. Magic Spoon has turned their super popular cereal into high protein treats that are light, crispy, and taste just like those classic crunchy cereal bars that Mom used to make. Magic Spoon's brand new treats are so delicious, they've become a go-to snack here at the Thompson household. I like it late night. My wife likes it on her way to the gym, a little pre-workout. And here's why you need Magic Spoon in your life. Every serving of Magic Spoon cereal has 13 grams of protein, 0 grams of sugar, and 4 grams of net carbs. So you can feel good about what you're eating. The most popular flavors are fruity and cocoa, but there's so many more. Magic Spoon's brand new treats are crispy, crunchy, and airy, and an easy way to get 12 grams of protein on the go. And now, for the first time ever, Magic Spoon treats are available in grocery stores with delicious flavors like marshmallow and chocolatey peanut butter. And right now, you can get $5 off your next order at magicspoon.com/83weeks. Or look for Magic Spoon on Amazon or in your nearest grocery store. That's magicspoon.com/83weeks for $5 off. Magic Spoon. Hold on to the dream. And man, there's a lot of great flavors, Eric, but is there anything better than their double chocolate? I think the double chocolate cereal bars from Magic Spoon might be the best thing Magic Spoon's ever made. I love them.
Peanut butter. Ooh.
It's pretty good.
I love the peanut butter bars and the cereal, by the way. It's a great midnight snack. I know that because I had it last night at midnight. We got home late, didn't really get a chance to eat the way I wanted to eat. Started to go to bed, realized I was still hungry. Didn't want to make a lot of noise or a mess. So I go into the pantry and I see my Magic Spoon peanut butter crunch. Oh my God. With an ice cold glass of milk. Come on.
Dude, I swear I do the same thing with the chocolate and the milk. And our buddy Jeff, he even says he keeps them in his Tahoe. So when he's riding around, running his errands and doing his honey-do list or what have you, he's not tempted to go get junk food and get off the path of his, health and wellness and fitness routine he's on. He doesn't want to hit a drive-through. So he just opens up the armrest. Boom. There's Magic Spoon. It's hard to beat. If you haven't tried it, or maybe you've tried the cereal and you haven't tried the bars, I want to give a strong recommendation. Eric recommends the peanut butter. I think it's called chocolatey peanut butter. I'm a big fan of the double chocolate. My dad was like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't like this, son. I don't eat this sort of stuff." You've seen my dad. He's just negative about stuff like that. Cause if it's something that he's not familiar with, I don't know about that. And then he had a bite and I saw the eyes look at me like the recoil was like, well, hang on now. That's pretty good. So then he goes, it was all right. And then the next day he comes in my office and he goes, "Hey, you got any more of those? Go get some, Dad." magicspoon.com/83weeks. Use the promo code 83weeks. And listen, I know I just told you can get it on Amazon. I know I just told you can go down to the grocery store. But if you'll use our link, it'll be cheaper than in either one of those places. Yes, you'll have to wait a few days, but you'll save some money and you'll really help the show. So go hook it up and tell a friend about Magic Spoon. Give them our promo code 83weeks. It'll be cheaper than at Amazon or at the grocery store, and it really helps the show. And thank you, Magic Spoon, for bringing these bars into the world. Goodness gracious, that double chocolate, go get on it. You'll be glad you did. Hey, let's talk about the end of Hardcore Justice. We talked about this being the ECW reunion that maybe wasn't as well received, but the fans that night loved it. They're chanting, "Thank you." They chanted, "F you, Vince." I can't believe that's a thing, but it happens. We see Dixie sort of smiling at that. Bubba comes and gets her from ringside, puts her in the ring. All the fans are chanting. The whole crowd is chanting, "Thank you, Dixie," and TNA. And then the day after, when now it's time to do television tapings, we see her absolutely dress down Ric Flair in the ring. He doesn't take too kindly to that. She goes after him, and her real life husband makes the save. Now, I'm not trying to pile on Dixie, but I am saying once upon a time, we've heard the stories that Russo was pushing for her to be a TV character, and she's saying, "Oh no, I don't want to do that." Now in this year, we're seeing her dress down talent in a pre-taped thing. We're seeing her being lifted up by the boys and "Thank you, Dixie." And now Ric Flair is going to come at her. So her husband makes the save. Are we getting lost in the sauce, as we like to say here in the South a little bit here?
I like that saying. I'm going to steal that and introduce it to Wyoming.
There you go.
Yeah, real bad. I think Dixie's reluctance would be natural. She didn't have a lot of confidence. She'd never done it before. It was all new to her. She didn't want to look bad. She was self-aware. But once, and I worked with Dixie, I know Jason worked really hard with Dixie and closely with Dixie to get her comfortable. Dixie had the ability to be good on camera, but boy, did it take a long time. Like, you'd have to have hours with her to get her. As I said earlier, Jason was really good at just working with talent, getting them comfortable with the process of how to get out a promo or an in-ring without it sounding like you're reading it off the back of a cereal box. Dixie had the ability, but it took forever to get her comfortable. That was the big issue. But once she started seeing herself on camera and doing a good job, because she could, that's when the beast started to become an issue, because she started to love it and wanted to do more of it, as anybody would.
Let's talk a little bit about something that happened in early 2011. TNAWrestling.com would make a post on their website asking fans to interact with Dixie on social media.
Oh, God.
At TNA Dixie or Facebook.com/TNA Dixie. And as soon as I bring that up, you go, oh God, I got to hear why you had such a visceral reaction to that.
I've said so many times that there's a lot of parallels between Dixie and Tony Khan.
Yeah.
And this is one of them. It would drive me fucking crazy. And I liked her. Still do. But at the time, I really liked Dixie. But she'd sit at Gorilla. Well, because that's what Vince does. Much like Tony. She'd sit at Gorilla, and the whole time the show's going on, she's not watching anything on a monitor, didn't care about nothing, not listening to the crowd. She's reading tweets and sending them. For 2 hours, she'd sit in Gorilla. People walk by her after the match. Hey, hi. And she's on her Twitter. She was obsessed with social media. Dixie's idea of what worked and didn't work all came from social media. She was listening to wrestling fans on social media and taking that guidance as to what she felt was good or not good, or what we should do more of. Much like, Tony Khan. Cage match rankings, same thing. She took that as a focus group, and it was such a pain in the ass, and you could not convince her not to do it. I tried making fun of her. I tried to do it in a lighthearted way, but it probably came off a little coarse. It's like, what the fuck are we doing here? We let the fucking internet book our shows. But that's essentially what started to happen. Yeah, she was obsessed with social media, obsessed with it.
Let's do some questions that she got. She would get questions like this. Is TNA going to get a new world belt so they won't all have to wear the Jeff Hardy belt? And Dixie would say, are you kidding? Yes, the sooner the better. Another would say, do you plan on moving the Impact Zone to somewhere else? I believe keeping it in Universal is crippling the audience. And Dixie says, there's no plans to move the production to another single facility. However, we are excited about taking Impact on the road to Fayetteville, North Carolina on February 24th and hope to do more Impact tapings from different locations in the future. Let's talk about that for a minute. What was your discussion like with Dixie about putting the show back on the road? Was she an advocate or was she against it?
Both. I think she understood it. She understood why. But she was the financial pressure from her mom, quite frankly, made it impossible. That's the part that made me lose my shit when it came to TNA. That if I have a bad taste in my mouth, and it's only partial, because there was a lot of other things that I look back on fondly, as I just said a few moments ago. But the lack of commitment and vision to grow the business drove me berserk. And there was just, and nobody cared. Nobody cared. I mean, look, TNA there was a moment in time when you had Viacom, who was not only paying for Hulk and for Eric and for Jason and for Kurt Angle and for a number of other big name talents. That was Viacom. That wasn't TNA money. That wasn't Dixie Carter's money. That wasn't even Janice Carter's money. That was Viacom's money. And Viacom spent, God, I don't know how much it was. I don't want to overstate it and end up being wrong, but a massive amount of money to come up with a rebranding effort for Impact. Networks don't do that. They don't spend time and their money promoting your show. That's your job as a producer. Now, the network will promote the show on their network, but not to the extent that Viacom was. They were really invested in the show. And there was a point in time when they could have, and I believe wholeheartedly, in fact, I'm going to be talking to Scott Fishman, who was with Viacom at the time. He reached out to me the other day. He saw the Mr. McMahon stuff on Netflix, and he reached out and wants to get together. Scott Fishman worked directly with Kevin Kay at Viacom. Fishman was our network liaison. Scott was totally invested in what we were doing and wanted to do more. TNA didn't want to do anything. Janice didn't want to invest any money. We want our money back. They had invested X amount of dollars. Jeff Jarrett would know this better than I. I wasn't involved in any of it. But they had invested a bunch of money to set Dixie up, get whatever, screw she out of there, whatever they had to do. There was I heard at one point it was like $30 million was their initial investment. All they cared about was getting that $30 million back for their Panda Energy investors, because that's where it came from, right? They just wanted to get that paid back, and they wanted TNA to sustain itself. They didn't care what happened to it after that. There was no vision for it. There was no desire to watch it become something big. There was no exit strategy involved. This is just let's buy this for our daughter Dixie so she can be the first female president of a major wrestling company, and she can have fun doing that because she's not working with us over here at Panda Energy. So let's let her do that. And once she's got that off and running, then we're done. We're out. Had there been somebody financially behind TNA that wanted to see it grow, with a partner like Viacom at that moment in time, TNA would be killing it today because they had the talent. There were enough of the right people in place to grow the business, both in the ring and behind the scenes. Kevin Sullivan was a great producer. David Sahadi, who worked for WWE, was the director at TNA, and is now working with MLW, I believe. Not the best director in the history of the wrestling business, but not far behind. He was great. Great guy to work with. There was enough pieces together where TNA could have been a major wrestling promotion. Were it not for the idea of, no, we don't want anything to do with it. We don't want a partner. I pitched the idea of going to Viacom and selling them part of the company, letting them become an equity partner, because then they'd be invested, more invested than they already were, to help grow the business. You think that I was going in there and, discussing, pitching the idea of burning puppies. It's like, oh, no, we're never going to do that. What do you mean you're never going to do that? The reason they didn't want to do it is because they didn't want anybody in their books. They didn't want to have to answer to anybody. They didn't want to have to explain anything to anybody. That's it. It's the only reason. That kind of shit drove me crazy. Still does. If you get me on that, if I spend more than another 30 seconds talking about it, I'll get fucking hot for the rest of the day.
We got a few more questions here that Dixie got that I want to share her answers with you. She's asked about the best moment in TNA. She said signing the Spike deal was huge. The Kurt Angle Thursday night Spike announcement, the Hulk Hogan press conference in NYC, the Wembley Arena. She had a lot of positive ones. She's asked, what was your biggest mistake so far running TNA? I know the list is long, but narrow it down to one. Wow, what phrasing. Dixie says, the move to Monday nights. We have a loyal audience on Thursdays, and that move proved that. Even the ratings of the Thursday replay were as high or higher than the debut telecast. Did you guys battle head-to-head on that decision about Monday or Thursday? Do you recall those conversations?
No, everybody was on board. Spike was on board. Dixie was on board. Look, we had to make a noise. We had to create awareness because TNA was the tree that fell in the forest, relatively speaking, in context with the rest of what was going on television at the time. TNA was a tree that fell in the forest every Thursday night. Nobody heard it. Very few did. So we had to change that. Why bring in a guy like Hulk Hogan if you're going to keep it a fucking secret? How do you make the biggest noise you possibly can? Pick a fight with an 800-pound gorilla and see what happens. That's exactly what that was. And it worked. So in terms of, the discussions leading up to it, Kevin Kay, the president of Viacom, president of Spike, absolutely on board. Scott Fishman, on board. Dixie, excited as hell. I can't speak to the rest of Panda Energy, who are the real decision makers in that company, because I just never communicated with them. But everybody was on board. Now, obviously, it didn't work out the way everybody had hoped it was going to work out, but it succeeded in its goal in creating awareness and letting the world know that Hulk Hogan was now in TNA.
Hey, let's talk a little.
And Ric Flair and others.
Yeah, a lot of others. We got a live studio audience here with us from adfreeshows.com. And Aaron Sheen wants to know, do you think they tried to position Dixie as the Stephanie McMahon for TNA?
No, they wanted to position her as Vince McMahon.
Yeah.
That's what Dixie wanted. That was her primary driver, was to be recognized as the first female president of a highly successful professional wrestling company. She wanted to be in the same conversation as Vince McMahon or Paul Heyman or Eric Bischoff, much like Tony Khan. There's a lot of similarities there.
Eric Bryant has a question here. He says, this is a question to Dixie that she answered on social back in the day. Can you tell me how you felt when you saw Booker T and Kevin Nash at the Royal Rumble and realized your original plans for they were screwed? They was a TNA angle. And Dixie says Booker was not available for any MEM angle. Kevin Nash was under contract with TNA and was just recently released for reasons I will not disclose. From the beginning, if we did a main event mafia angle, it would not have been with the original group, and it would have been a short-term story to get to something else. To see they tune in tonight on Spike, I'm pretty sure the fans will be happy. I know I am. The narrative here is Dixie just decided to help her old friend Kevin Nash out and let him out of his contract to do the Rumble. Is that the way you heard that?
I don't recall hearing much about that, to be honest.
Lots of rumor and innuendo. I'm sure
it could. Look, Dixie she wasn't tough to do business with. She didn't have jail food mentality. And I shouldn't say that because that makes it sound bad. Like Tony Khan has recently been accused of, who is it? Is it Phoenix? Somebody that wants to go to WWE.
Oh, Ray Phoenix. Yeah. I can tell you the whole story on that, but
look, Tony made a commitment. There's a contract in place. I understand. I'm sticking up for Tony in this case. You have to draw a line. You have to manage your talent. You have to manage your contracts. And just because somebody wants to go somewhere doesn't mean that you should let them go, because then you'll be doing it for everybody else that wants out of their contracts early. So I get whatever he's doing. I support it when it comes to protecting your assets, because that's what talent contracts are. They are nothing more or less than assets to a business. Obviously, there's people involved in those assets, but it's an asset. You have to manage it. It's part of being in business. But Dixie had a big heart, and it wouldn't surprise me if she let him go to do what he wanted to do.
I just find all of that interesting or fascinating or all the above. Let's talk a little bit about Dixie and her Twitter activity. She's doing all this in February. In March of 2011, she gets suspended from Twitter. I guess in that era, you had to be verified in order to get the blue check mark. She just added one to her profile, and I guess the folks didn't like that and said, nope, you got to go. Of course, the company makes the decision to move back to Thursdays, and there's a narrative out here, and this is from ProWrestling.net, our pal Jason Powell, who says the wrestlers were told that TNA, as well as Eric Bischoff and Jason Hervey's production team, conducted the bulk of the market research and were told that fans overwhelmingly wanted Thursday to be established as the TNA wrestling night. It seems like a convenient excuse given that the ratings showed that TNA was being crushed by WWE on Monday nights. If it is an excuse, I guess you can't blame TNA and Spike TV for the spin. If their concern was keeping the locker room morale steady, did she view the Monday night experiment as was she frustrated, I guess, by that experiment?
Disappointed, I think, is a better word. By the way, we didn't do any, Eric Bischoff and Jason Hervey's production company didn't do research. I don't know where that came from, Jason. Jason Powell's usually right on the money.
Well, hang on. He's not saying you did. He's saying TNA is telling people that you did.
And he's saying, lying through their teeth. They were lying through their teeth.
He does a whole satire thing, Eric, that I'll send to you, which is hilarious, where he says, "Dear Mrs. Carter, please find below the summary report from our market research that you ordered from us, blah, blah, blah." And here's an example. Current, former, and potential pro wrestling fans prefer to watch TNA wrestling on Thursday nights rather than Monday nights. Please note, we actually didn't have to do any research on this topic, so you won't be charged. We simply looked at the Nielsen Media Research ratings for the last 10 weeks and saw how terribly you were getting spanked by the competition. And he continues through all these bullet points that are just obvious, like, duh, you don't need research to know you need to move it back. But I get why, we don't want to just say we got our ass kicked, we're retreating 3 days later. We got to frame it a different way for the public. I get that. Let's just put a button on this whole thing. I mean, there's lots of back and forth about gotchas and specific things with Dixie, but we know that in the end, she is not given any credit for the careers and opportunities that she created for a whole host of people. And it's almost like LOL Dixie. And it's been that way in the internet wrestling community for a while, but I'm going to stand on business, as the kids say. I don't know that we would have Samoa Joe and AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels and so many other great talent. I mean, guys like Consequences Creed, who we know now has just torn it up for the last 10 years or more with New Day. Like, there's so many great talent that went through there, and it created and provided an opportunity for those guys who, for whatever reason, were not getting any attention from WWE to still continue to work at a high level and perform their craft and hone their craft and get better and take care of their family. They didn't have to just
pay and pay their bills.
That's what I'm getting to, because normally guys, hey, I got a wife, I got kids, I got to go get a job. I can't just play grab ass here. There's got to be a future in this. And Dixie allowed that at her family's financial expense year after year after year. I just don't think that the wrestling business is where it is right now without Dixie Carter. And I don't think enough people are saying that, Eric.
I think that's a little broad, Conrad. I think the business would be exactly where the business is without Dixie Carter and TNA. I think the individuals that you referenced may not be a part of it, because of exactly what you said. It's one thing to learn your craft and get better at your craft and go out there every night and practice and get yourself on TV and grow your own personal brand. But you've got to be able to pay your bills in the process, or you're going to be working in a warehouse or as a stockbroker or whatever, a real estate agent. Dixie did provide those people an opportunity to stick with their dream and to get better and grow with it. I don't think, in terms of its impact on the industry in general, I can't ascribe a lot of credit to TNA for that, but I can certainly acknowledge what they did for individuals. But again, there's a lot of similarity there with Tony in AEW. I don't think AEW is necessarily good or bad for the business. It's certainly a great thing for the people that are getting a check every 2 weeks. But at the end of the day, will AEW have any lasting impact other than the emotional impact of some diehard Kool-Aid drinking AEW fans? I don't think so. Business is still, if AEW disappeared tomorrow, WWE is going to continue to do what WWE's been doing for 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, I didn't mean to say that it affected the company, but there's more to the wrestling business than one individual company. It is the sum of the parts. And you've got guys like Okada and guys like the Young Bucks and AJ Styles and Samoa Joe and Desmond Wolfe, who we know as Nigel McGuinness, and so many others who had an opportunity, and just having that opportunity, that other company out there just raises the stakes of the entire industry and makes everybody better. And I don't know, I'm hoping that with enough time, people take another look at Dixie Carter. And yes, she did have some missteps, and we'll talk about some of those another time. But next week, we're going to be talking about something that you and I have managed to not do together ever. We're going to watch back the first Nitro that Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara ever produced, and we're doing it on the 25th anniversary of the show. So stay tuned for that next week here on 83 Weeks. In the meantime, if you just can't get enough Eric, how about letting Eric save you some cash at savewitheric.com? Come on now. If you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Go get yourself a quick quote from Eazy-E himself. That's right. Eric Bischoff is licensed to help you save money on your mortgage. Specifically, if you can hear my voice and you've got credit card debt, what are you waiting for? How's this for starters? No house payments until next year. This is going to be the first year you don't have to put Christmas on a credit card. And if you've been feeling like there's more month at the end of the money, Eric can help. I've been having conversations with people this year who would tell me like, hey, I'm waiting for the rates to come down a little bit before I refinance. I got a great rate, but boy, I'm drowning in this credit card debt. Hey man, not to bust your bees, but if you've got credit card debt at like 28 or 31%, don't you just know you can do better than that? Not only is the interest that you're paying just astronomical, it's also not tax deductible, whereas the interest you pay on your mortgage is tax deductible. So let's recap. If you could get a better interest rate and get a greater tax deduction and get a cheaper monthly payment and even skip your next two house payments, where's the downside? Let us run the numbers. Find out how much money you can save for free at savewitheric.com. You don't need perfect credit. You don't need money out of your pocket. What you need is a plan. You need a friend in the mortgage business. And Eazy-E is your friend in the mortgage business because he's not going to say no. He's going to say not yet, but here's how. You need a plan. And I'm talking to you if you've been late on credit card payments this year. I'm talking to you if you've been late on your mortgage this year. I'm talking to you if you filed bankruptcy this year. Now, am I guaranteeing we're going to be able to do a loan for you right now? No. But you need the advice and knowledge of how do you get yourself back on track? What's a good 3-month goal? What's a good 6-month goal? What should your life look like a year from now? We want to be your mortgage advisor for life. And Eric Bischoff has been doing this for more than 3 years, and he's ready to help you save some cash. He himself saved over $1,000 a month. Find out how much money you can save when you take advantage of this opportunity. I'm telling you, the second chance you've been looking for, it's been hiding out in your house this whole time. It's not in the attic. It's not in the basement. It's not in the junk drawer in your kitchen. It's in the equity in your house. Your house is all of a sudden worth more than ever. And if you've got all these other debts, man, let's get a smarter, cheaper, faster way to get out of debt. And we can help at savewitheric.com. That's savewitheric.com. NMLS number 2129, equal housing lender. Eric, today was a fun episode, man. I like talking about the cruiserweights last week. I like talking about Dixie Carter this week. But I'm looking forward to watching an old Nitro from Vince Russo next week.
That'll be a blast. I've enjoyed the last two shows have been really fun. I love the pacing of it and getting into the detail and some of the stories. So I appreciate you and Dave Silva for making it happen. It's still, after all these years, Conrad, you may not remember this, but when you and I first started talking about doing a podcast together, we kind of half-assed knew each other from a relatively interesting experience in your basement with a couple cases of beer. But I was a little tentative, and I think you were too. And I think our agreement was, let's just do it. And as long as we're having fun, we'll keep doing it. And when we stop having fun, we'll stop doing it. I've had more fun over the last couple of weeks than I've had ever doing this stuff. So thank you guys for making it fun.
We're having fun, and we're glad you are too. There's going to be more Eric Bischoff before you know it at 83weeks.com. If you haven't already, go hit the subscribe button, turn on the notifications bell. That's your home for all things Eric Bischoff. That's 83weeks.com. You're going to absolutely love it. And I can't wait next week to watch the good, the bad, and the ugly of the first ever Vince Russo Nitro right here on 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson here to tell you a little more about what adfreeshows.com is all about. Get early, ad-free access to more than a dozen of your favorite wrestling podcasts every single week, starting at just $9. That's less than 20 cents an episode each month. And yes, you can listen to them all directly through Apple Podcasts or your regular podcast apps. How easy is that? Ad-Free Shows also has thousands of hours worth of bonus content and docuseries like Title Chase, Eric Fires Back, Conversations with Conrad, and The Insiders. Plus new series like The Book with David Crockett, Monday Mailbags with Mike Chioda and Nick Patrick, and a whole lot more. And you want to talk about early? You can't get any earlier than listening to the shows live. You can be a part of the live studio audience as we record the podcast. Plus, ride shotgun alongside your favorite childhood heroes for live watch-alongs, Q&As, and other interactive experiences every single month. Come on now, see for yourself what thousands of other wrestling fans from around the world have discovered, that adfreeshows.com is the best value in wrestling. Check it out today, and hey, when you do, the first week is completely free. adfreeshows.com.